Chapter 29:15. Clang. The sword slashed out, as if it was splitting the heavens and earth apart. Bloody light surged in all directions. What kind of joke is this? A bunch of ants trying to defy the heavens? The dragon god sword snorted, its tone filled with disdain. Clang. Then, the dragon god sword shook violently, releasing an apocalyptic aura that tore through the chaotic zone and met the blood-red sword. Clang. The two divine weapons clashed once again, and a terrifying shockwave swept out in all directions. Puff! Qin Feiyang immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. A crack appeared on the blood-red sword in his hand. Qin Feiyang was stunned. What was going on? Previously, it could suppress the dragon god sword, and even damage the body of the dragon god sword. But now it was no match for the dragon god sword. You think you can challenge me with this little ability? You're overestimating yourself. Now, I'll show you the true power of a sovereign divine weapon. Let me show you how terrifying it is. The dragon god sword's words were full of disdain. Boom! As its voice fell, the light emitted by the dragon god sword became even more dazzling. The aura it released also became more and more terrifying. Not good. Qin Feiyang, the sovereign divine weapon is awakening. The roar of the sunset bow suddenly came from afar. Awakening. Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank. That's right. A sovereign divine weapon could be awakened. Previously, the dragon god sword had not awakened at all. Awakening and not awakening were two completely different levels of existence. Take a heaven-defying divine weapon for example. A heaven-defying divine weapon that had not awakened was at most a little stronger than a supreme divine weapon. But a fully awakened heaven-defying divine weapon had the terrifying power to destroy a continent. These were two different concepts. It was too careless to have overlooked such an important point. One had to know. This kind of carelessness could be fatal. Thinking of those fatal consequences, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. If the heaven dragon god sword that had yet to be awakened was already this powerful, then how terrifying would the heaven dragon god sword be after it was awakened? Clang! The heavenly dragon god sword trembled incessantly as divine might and sharpness engulfed heaven and earth. It was as if a peerless divine king was awakening. At this moment, not only the inland sea, but the entire divine land was shaking. The mountains and rivers were collapsing crazily. The earth continued to sink. The magma was like a fire dragon, roaring out from the ground. Even the North Sea, West Sea, South Sea, and East Sea had huge waves. What is this aura? The Mermaid Emperor, the Black-Winged Emperor, the White-Winged Emperor, and the Sword Emperor, who were in charge of the four seas, were all standing in the air above the sea. As soon as he heard this voice, watching the scene in shock. Li Chang said, "This seems to be Wang Chang is looking for Dominator divine weapon. Wang Chang is looking for me. The sovereign weapons aura actually reached this place? Yes. Could it be? Wang Chang sent me a message saying that he'll be waiting for you. Are you guys really going to Dragon City? When the fourth thought of what do you mean? They couldn't help Dragon City and the others were puzzled. Although they hadn't seen the help but praise Dominator divine weapon with their own eyes. Is it really okay for us to harm the far away to see clearly Wang Chang divine weapon? Are you sure it's him? For example, the old woman and the others exchanged entered the divine land and looked at Wang Chang with long bewilderment. Strange. Wang Chang said that battle. Heaven defying divine weapons such as the axe and the others looked at him as cannon fodder. Qin Feiyang, the old woman, where the dragons were again. Not only did it affect the entire North Sea, anyone could tell the northern region was destroyed. Originally, the creatures in the northern region were also killed and the others were immediately. One could imagine. That's not battle hadn't happened in the North Sea dragons, but in the northern region, the entire northern to look at the place where looking at the Prince of Dragons. But he couldn't heaven-defying divine weapon. He could only already see so terrifying. However, I didn't expect that at then this point. Then a Dominator divine weapon would even more terrifying. I can't see clearly. The entire divine land would have fallen into doomsday. But why did you about you in private? The Prince of Dragons is indeed not bad. The old woman nodded and looked at Wang Chang. Even more, what are you trying to say? They really wanted to see pondering for a moment, but guarding Wang Chang was also very important. And take the opportunity if the dragons were desperate and sent people to hide it for regions to kill the innocent. Qin Feiyang could entire dragon world would be old woman's character and the others were shocked. Still possible. This was not what they wanted such a thing. That's the reason why Qin Feiyang was worried about this. Wang Chang. So he asked them to hope that dragons can leave with me. So for the sake of the ancient world, we can no longer only endure. Did you hear me harm our compatriots? Above the Wang Chang exclaimed, "I asked Wang Chang when the old woman and the other said he came to seek refuge that Wang Chang is with him. The witch knows how you guys must be very shocked to hear that. Qin Feiyang looked at the aura emitted by the dragon of my heart that Wang Chang had Qin Feiyang has said. It was no exaggeration of the ancient realm. The current aura of the dragon god's sword was enough to flatten this old man. What have we been doing? In an instant, he has the cultivation of the indistinguishable realm. We've been helping the dragon's refuge. At this moment, frowned and the dragon god's sword had far surpassed the blood-colored sword in his hands. Think about it. This was the awakened divine weapon. When we first stepped onto the path of cultivation, the madman, Wang Chang clutched Qin Feiyang nodded. In other heaven, it was a critical moment now, were also and the others fell silent. They had already retreated to the coast of the inland when they stepped on the path of cultivation. The terrifying aura emitted by the dragon god sword made them when they stepped onto the path of cultivation different. Snowflake, someone to protect their family. I'll send you to someone to protect themselves. His voice was like a bang that resounded in that space-time tunnel. However, Snowflake, no matter what her original intention, and used her power of law to open a space-time tunnel. We can't let down our cultivation. Descended above everyone. It's time to wake up and retreated into the space-time tunnel. Wang Chang and the other side immediately kept their hands and smiled. If we continue to help the evildoers, it seems to be out of our expectations by the future generations. Qin Feiyang nodded. His expression was full of vigilance as he asked. The madman asked, "What is the meaning of this? If we want to destroy the dragon 2923, we must further destroy the dragon like sword. Two having defined divine artifacts. You guys go to the castle first, destroying heaven and earth." The previously to destroy the dragon heaven-defying divine artifact that the madman brought out from hell. I believe that brother's strange thing was that the heaven-defying divine artifact Wang chose him as its master. People said word by word that now that the heaven-defying divine artifact there was no turning back by the madman for free. But the power of the destroy the dragon god's undeniable. Leave the rest of me nodded and the madman the holy dragon sword of Prince Dragon in a you guys as the battle heated up. What do you mean? The damage of the Chang heaven-defying divine artifact. To tell you the truth is light as a feather had expected. And head of the holy dragon had the mermaid essence of mix of various madman patted Qin Feiyang and the black demon tower also had many crafts. Qin Feiyang nodded and defined divine artifacts. It would definitely the situation where sunset divine bow. If you guys really want heaven-defying artifacts to the castle, you would probably really not going to Qin Feiyang let out a long sigh and instantly disappeared. If it were someone else, the power of the blood-colored sword was far from others. It needed to absorb more blood difficulty in an instant, but his current lad had already made arrangements. A day outside, this person was an opponent worthy of respect. Why did the dragon take long the dragon? The old woman looked at the image. Actually, no matter who moment, he was like, we don't want to be traitors. Why hasn't there been a response? However, we have no choice. They see now that things have come to us. We have no entire body was covered in blood. Until now that Yizhong faked his death by flames condensed Qin Feiyang destroyed his body. That's because she could have killed him even several times before shattered but none of them were as terrifying as today. She still asked strong filling intent Wang Chang precedent each other and not. The power of the blood-colored sword deaths on was also a level stronger than then what should we do now? Of the four major Chang pondered for a while and had to look at Divine Dragon Island for such a calamity surging with blood-colored light pointed in Long Zun's actions. Establish a contract bridge with the venerable initiative to ask Long Zun, but before the blood-colored sword and Qin Feiyang to inner way into the inland heading straight for Divine Dragon Island. The intention compared to the image crystal was also shattered a bit more ruthless. The old woman slightly sinister sighed. At the same time, it seems that dragon god Feiyang also might see to find them. Qin Feiyang looked at Qin the burly man suddenly seemed to have thought of some chaos. The person who really charged straight to the old woman and said, more than 10 breaths Feiyang was stunned. The two met in the air above the inner for the ancient world without a word. They directly killed each other. The ruler divine weapon the sharp Wang Chang divine women were stunned. It really touched me. Every time they collided in realization, it also made us old fellows feel so ashamed that we can't show our faces. Wang Chang immediately thinking about red Long we're already so old back then, but we're actually answering to a young man like you. The dragon god snorted coldly. So the image crystal was bitterly there. The old was no longer any damage. Were also watching the battle. There will be a day when Qin Feiyang looked at the Prince of Dragons. And Qin Feiyang's ruthless aura became more and more terrifying. It doesn't seem like the blood-colored light. We can't let our guard down. More and more intense. Qin Feiyang was like taken aback as he blood-colored sword constantly waved. Qin Feiyang replied and looked at Wang Chang and the others with all directions. I'm really happy that all of you can turn back from Divine Dragon Island. However, all the members of the Dragon Clan that all of you can understand that at this critical juncture, but because the battlefield was far away from Divine Dragon Island, therefore I have to control all of you. Dragons and humans could not see it clearly. Wang Chang and the others could not help but frown. A supreme expert like Long Zun was able to clearly sense it. Of
They were
course,
extremely
I
shocked
promised
in their
that
hearts.
once the dragons are
Although
destroyed,
Qin Feiyang was
I
at
will
a
immediately
disadvantage,
remove my control
that
over all
unyielding
of
and
you.
unyielding
Qin
spirit
Feiyang said,
made them feel
Yi
ashamed
Zhong
of their
said,
inferiority.
I can guarantee that.
They asked themselves,
Wang Chang,
if it
and
were
the
them,
others looked at each
they would
other
have long
and
given up
pondered
in
in
the
face
face
of the sovereign
a
divine
moment
weapon.
later,
Wang
Wang
Chang
Chang
continued
continued
to
to
fight
Zhong
so
and said with a
crazily,
smile,
putting everything
Since
else
brother,
aside,
you can guarantee
this
it.
child was
There's no
indeed
harm
an
in
amazing
that.
person.
All right then,
It really makes
Chief
me
Hall
more and
Master
more
Yi is
excited.
trustworthy.
The Prince of
The
Dragons
old lady,
murmured,
and
with
the
a trace
other
of a
11
smile on
people
his
expressed
face.
their opinions
This
one
person
after
was
another.
worthy to be his
Qin
opponent.
Feiyang formed
Only
hand
this
seals
man
with
was
both
worthy of
hands,
him
and
defeating
12
and
slavery
subduing.
seals appeared
Boom.
immediately.
Clang.
Wait
The
a minute.
battle had reached its
Wang Chang
climax.
suddenly thought of
The
something
aura
and
and
spoke.
sharpness of the heaven
What's the
dragon
matter?
god sword
Qin
continued
Feiyang
to
and Yi
soar.
Zhong looked at him
Obviously,
suspiciously.
it had not entered
After
a
the
state
fate
of full
contract
recovery.
is removed.
Moreover,
Will Long
no
Zun
one
be
knew
able
how
to
strong
sense
it would be
immediately
when it entered a
Wang
state
Chang
of full
asked.
recovery.
Yes.
Perhaps
Qin
even Long
Feiyang
Zun
nodded.
did not know this point.
That's not good,
because since
Wang
ancient
Chang shook his
times,
head.
the
Why
sovereign
not?
divine weapon
The more
had never
Qin Feiyang
truly
listened,
recovered.
the more
A
puzzled
divine
he was.
artifact of this
Wang
level
Chang
was
said,
an enigmatic
You
existence.
should know that the dragons
Only
still
when
have
it
many
revealed
supreme
itself
experts
could
of
one
the human
truly
race,
understand
right?
how
I
terrifying
know
it
that.
was.
Qin
However,
Feiyang nodded. Qin Feiyang
actually,
was not
these
afraid.
people are in a
When
similar
the slaughter
situation.
successfully
They
entered
are
the
all
fourth
forced to
stage,
stay with the
he
dragons
also had a new
because they have
understanding
no
of
other
it.
choice.
Since the
If they are
slaughter
given
could
a
enter the
chance,
fourth stage,
they will definitely
it would
choose
definitely
to leave the
become
dragons.
stronger.
Therefore,
As long as there was
I'm
enough
thinking,
blood,
should we give them a
crack.
chance too?
The cracks
Wang
on the
Chang
blood-colored
said,
sword
of
were
course,
increasing
that's for
in
the
number
best.
and density.
Qin Feiyang
It was like a
smiled.
layer of spider
However,
web that would
if you
shatter
help
at
us
any
remove
time.
the fate contract
Boom.
now,
Clang.
Long
The
Zun
two
might
divine
implicate
weapons
these
collided
people when he
once
finds
again.
out.
Poof.
Wang Chang was
Qin
worried.
Feiyang spurted
That's
out blood
right.
and anger.
Everyone knows
His entire
Long Zun's
body
character.
was sent flying like
She
a
is
meteor.
vicious and merciless.
The blood-colored sword
If
was
she
also
finds
on the
out that we
verge
have
of shattering.
betrayed the dragons,
Swish.
she might
However,
be enraged and
in
kill
an instant
all
he
the supreme
disappeared.
experts of
But
the
the
human
next
race.
moment, he
The
appeared
old
in the
lady
sky
also
above
said
the
in
inner
a deep
sea.
voice.
The cracks
This
on the
Qin
blood-colored
Feiyang
sword
frowned.
had disappeared.
Yi Zhong pondered
That's
for a
right.
while before looking
Not
at
only
Qin
could fresh
Feiyang and
blood
saying,
increase the power
their
of the
worries are not
blood-colored sword,
unreasonable.
but it could
Qin
also repair
Feiyang
the
looked at Yi
cracks on the
Zhong.
sword.
Think about
Although
it.
it was only for
First
a
it was
moment,
me, then
the
Li
slaughter
Chang,
had absorbed
and
a
now
large
Wang
amount
Chang
of
and the
fresh
rest.
blood in the western
Since they have
region of the
defected
Black
one
Tortoise
after
world.
another,
And
not
not
only
only
was
was
the
the blood-colored sword
the
repaired,
remaining people
but
must
its
have
power
the
had also
intention to
increased
defect
by
as
another
well.
level.
At that time,
Again,
with her character,
Qin Feiyang
she
roared.
would rather kill
The
everyone than
blood-colored
continue
sword
to let
carried
you
a
off
world-destroying
easy.
sharpness.
After all,
And
these
once
people
again
are
clashed
supreme
with the
experts.
Heaven Dragon God
Once
sword.
all of them defect and join our camp,
Chapter
the dragons will have
29:16.
even less hope.
Black Tortoise
Yi
Realm.
Zhong looked at
Fire
Qin
Lotus
Feiyang and said,
Yi Zhong, Qin Batian, White-Eyed Wolf, Mermaid Princess. And the
Chapter
others had been watching the
29:24.
battlefield outside.
In that case, their
we
faces
still have
were
to
filled
think of
with
a way
pride
to
and
lure
worry.
all of them over
How
from
terrifying
Long
was
Zun's
a
side.
sovereign divine
Qin
weapon.
Feiyang said,
Qin Feiyang
That's
could
impossible
fight with the sovereign
now
divine
that the war
weapon
is
to
about
this
to
extent.
begin.
Long
As friends,
Zun won't
brothers,
let them
elders,
leave.
lovers,
Wang Chang
masters,
shook
and
his head.
subordinates.
If they
How
don't
could
come,
they not be proud?
how am I supposed to
Similarly,
help them remove
in
the
the face
control?
of such a
Qin
terrifying
Feiyang
sovereign
frowned.
divine weapon,
When Wang Chang
they were
heard
also
that,
worried.
he lowered his
They
head
were
and
afraid
pondered.
that something bad
Yi
would
Zhong,
happen to Qin
the old
Feiyang.
lady and the others
Fire
pondered in
Lotus.
their hearts as well.
Suddenly, Qin
Two
Feiyang
figures
suddenly
rushed
said,
into the devil's
I have
land.
a plan.
When they saw
Everyone
the scene in the
raised their
sky,
heads
they were
and
shocked.
looked at Qin Feiyang
These two were
immediately.
Pai Lupi and
Qin
Theta Wang.
Feiyang said,
They had brought
however,
two
there's
seas
a
of blood
certain
with
risk
them.
to this method.
The fresh blood was
What
collected
risk?
by them.
Wang Chang
You're
asked.
here.
I
Fire
need one
Lotus
of you
looked
to
at the
return
two
to
and
Long
smiled,
Zun's side,
but her smile was
informed
very
the others
forced.
in secret.
Yes,
In short, we're here to bring
when
you
the war
blood.
starts,
The
gather
two
them
nodded.
together.
Thank you
At
for your
that
hard
time,
work.
I'll
Fire
find an
Lotus
opportunity
looked at
to
the two
help them
gratefully.
remove the control
It's not
of the
hard.
destiny contract.
The two shook their heads
Qin
and
Feiyang
looked at the
said,
scene in the sky
That's
again.
a good idea.
What kind of
However,
divine weapon is that?
Don't forget that
It's
Long
so
Zun
powerful.
possesses the
It's a
ability
sovereign
to hear
divine
the voice
weapon that
transmissions
surpasses
of others.
divine weapons.
How are we going to
Fire
communicate
Lotus said,
with the others then?
Hiss.
Yi
The
Zhong
two of
said,
them sucked in a
That's
breath
one
of
of the
cold
risks.
air.
They
Another
never thought
risk
that
is that
Qin
if any
Feiyang
of them
would
are
be diehard
diehard
with
fans
such a
of the
terrifying
dragons,
existence,
they will
be exposed.
The most important thing
Therefore,
was,
the person
even
who
in the
returns
face of
will
such
be
a
in
divine
danger
weapon
at any moment.
Qin Feiyang did not give up.
Who in the
Chang
world
and the
had
others
such a
remained
spirit?
silent.
The
All of a
sovereign
sudden,
divine weapon did
gritting
not
his
give up.
teeth, we
Wang
can't give
Chang
up
looked
either.
at Qin Feiyang
Theta
and
Wang,
said,
let's
I'll
continue.
return. Let all the
You have to
creatures
think
in the
carefully.
Black Tortoise
Qin
realm
Feiyang said,
contribute their
it was
strength.
fine for Wang Chang
Hai
to
Lupi
return.
roared. After
Okay,
Wang Chang returned,
Theta Wang nodded.
he could tell
The
Long
two
Zun
immediately
that
put
the old
down the
lady
two
was
seas of
already in the
blood,
hands of
turned
the Sword
around,
Emperor
and
broke
the other
away like
three.
lightning.
That way, Long
Hai
Zun would
Lupi
not
and the others
suspect
are right.
anything.
Even
That was
Qin
because the
Feiyang
destiny
hasn't given
contract
up.
would
We can't
dissipate
give up
after
either.
a person died.
All members of
Wang
the
Chang
Dragon
said,
Slaying Palace,
I've already
listen
thought
up.
about it.
Offer your
At
blood
most, I'll
immediately.
die.
We
Qin
can only
Feiyang
win this
asked,
battle.
How
we
are you
cannot
going
lose.
to communicate with
Lu
the others
Xingyang
in
shouted.
secret?
Outside,
That's right.
although
Voice
he had the protection
transmission
of the
definitely
slaughter
won't
domain.
work.
Qin Feiyang was already covered in wounds. There doesn't seem to be a better way to communicate other than voice transmission. He did not retreat. The old woman was also deeply worried. Activating the battle character formula, I think we should just leave them be. Formula. The burly man suddenly his hand. Qin Feiyang clashed with the dragon god sword. Immediately looked at the man. Suddenly, I agree. Along with a loud sound, another crack appeared on the blade of the sky dragon. There's really no need for you to risk your life for these people. The dragon god sword was also enraged. Yes, this was already the second time of the remaining people. Although it was a sovereign weapon is only at the initial imperishable realm. This was even undoubtedly if all of them worked together to it. They still wouldn't be as useful as you. The sharpness and aura of the dragon god sword once again, it would be our loss. Following closely, the others also tried to persuade him. Accompanied by a loud clang, watch them die at Long Zun's the blood sword immediately broke in the middle. There are always sacrifices of the dragon god sword slashed at the slaughter domain that concerns the future of humanity. Crack. Although the slaughter domain also cracked. The truth. A sword chi swept into the slaughter domain. They should have realized this when they chose to follow the dragons. Immediately, besides, Long Zun might not kill them flying. After all, he needs people now. The battle armor formed by the battle character formula was also shattered on the spot. Qin Feiyang no matter how strong the slaughter domain is, to tell you the truth, the sharpness I don't have much sympathy for these people. This is a sovereign weapon. This is the path they chose. The dragon god sword shouted no danger and there's no harm in saving them. But if they really have to risk their lives, I don't agree. However, it's too early to be proud now. In your hands. Qin Feiyang shouted and disappeared in an instant. Wang Chang fell silent. You can't absorb really anymore. A cruel choice. Otherwise, to tell the truth, and murderous aura he had never thought or later that he would one day be faced with such a choice. If he didn't save them, appeared in the sky above the western blood sea. But if he went to save them, also he might lose his own life. It doesn't matter. Looked at Wang Chang. Qin Feiyang shook his head, struggling to walk with a shake of his body. Feiyang, the blood and the blood sea below immediately rushed into the slaughter domain. Then turned to slaughter domain immediately healed. Master, you want to save them too? The broken blood sword was also instantly repaired. We're all with a large amount of blood rushing in. I feel terrible if I don't save them. More and more terrifying. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. Fire Lotus clearly noticed that Qin Feiyang's face and looked at everyone more and more ferocious. I still want to try. His eyes were like condensed blood. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. Coldness. I really don't know what to do with his body. Had also reached an astonishing level. You're more heartless than anyone else. The slaughter god bathed in blood. When you're kind, was referring to Qin Feiyang than anyone else. She was very worried, smiled bitterly, but she couldn't stop it. You're mocking us, aren't you? Because they had already reached this step. Qin Feiyang no matter who it was. Thinking back, they wouldn't give up easily. People like Wang Chang done for the ancient world and humanity? Even if he knew all that absorbing blood would eventually cause him to turn into a demon at all, he wouldn't care. His when the power of the blood sword to another level, and pitying the fate of mankind, the Black Tortoise world without hesitation. That it was somewhat although a long time had passed in the Black Tortoise world, it's precisely a moment I've done too many wrong things in the past. The sword that I wanted to do my best to save turned into a torrent and rushed toward him. Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Chang's eyes were surging with bloody light. His expression was like sincere, 2 blood moons, and there were no signs of ruthless coldness. Swoosh. In the past, suddenly, no matter how cold Qin Feiyang let out a long breath and said, there was always a trace of pity in his eyes. I won't control you guys for now. This pity could no longer be found. He waved his hand. After absorbing too much blood, seals dissipated. He had become completely cold-blooded. The old woman now there was and only the others killing in his eyes. Feiyang in shock. He raised his arm that was holding the blood-colored longsword and destiny contract of sword control you guys. Boom. Long Zun won't know that you guys have already defected to me, shaking the heavens and shaking the earth. She won't be on guard. The aura of destruction swept through heaven and earth to save the others. The torrent formed by the sword chi immediately dissipated in the void. Wang Chang following closely. Of course you guys will enter the Black Tortoise world and stay by my side. Shattered in all directions. As long as the destiny contract is not removed, God sword with all his strength. Long Zun will think that you guys are still thinking of ways they were forced into the 4 major regions. Qin Feiyang also didn't know to what extent the power of the blood-colored sword had been stacked to. He didn't care about that now. This way, when I save the others, thought in his mind, I can help you remove the control of the dragon god sword. No matter the cost. Said. Kill. Wang Chang said in surprise. Qin Feiyang you're letting us enter the Black Tortoise world and now. Once again attacked the heavenly dragon divine sword with his sword. Are you guys really worthy of my trust? His entire person was like a wild beast looked at the 12 people. His eyes flashing with people tremble. The Black Tortoise world was his headquarters. The 2 divine weapons collided once again. Everything he had was in the Black Tortoise world. World-destroying shockwaves. If these people had ulterior motives, another gap appeared on the blade went on a heavenly dragon divine sword. The losses would not be small. Moreover, it was several times bigger than the previous 2 gaps. Then looked up at Qin Feiyang and said in unison, "You have completely angered this lord. You can trust us." The weapon spirit of the dragon god sword roared. I'll
As
let
a
you guys
sovereign
go
divine
to the Black
weapon,
Tortoise world.
it was actually injured by a human again and again,
and the 12
this was
people
simply a
disappeared.
great humiliation.
At the side,
Clang,
Yi Zhong looked at
accompanied
Qin
by a
Feiyong
sharp
in
sword
shock.
cry.
Master,
A peerlessly
what's with
terrifying
your
aura
reaction?
suddenly roared out.
Qin Feiyong was
Around
confused.
the heavenly dragon divine sword,
You're really not
numerous
worried about
enormous
letting them
heavenly
go to the
dragon
Black
phantoms
Tortoise world.
appeared.
Yi Zhong
1-5-10-50.
said, although they don't seem to have any
sky
flaws,
dragon phantoms
the Black
surrounded
Tortoise
the
world
dragon god
is
sword,
such an important
roaring
place.
and roaring.
How can I
The
let them
dragon's
go
might was
without worry?
monstrous.
I sent
At
them
this
to
moment,
the ancient
the
castle's
sense of
cultivation
crisis
room.
that Qin Feiyong
As the
felt
owner
was
of the
more
ancient
intense
castle,
than any other time.
I can control the
Those
stone
sky
door
dragon
of the
phantoms
cultivation
were
room.
like the incarnation
Without my
of the death
permission,
god. They can't
at
open
the same
the stone
time,
door.
A terrifying
Feiyong
pressure
smiled.
surged over.
Yi Zhong
His
shook
body
his head
seemed
and
to be
said,
frozen.
This old
unable
man
to
knew that
move.
you had a trick
And
up your
under the
sleeve.
impact of that
One
sharpness
must always
and
be
aura,
on guard against
the blood
others.
sword and the slaughtered
Qin Feiyong
domain were
smiled
also
and
trembling
said,
and cracking.
in the
And
cultivation
he
room,
himself was bleeding
even if
all
they
over,
self-destruct,
as if his
they won't
physical
be able
body
to
was
pose
about
any
to shatter
threat to the Black
so
Tortoise
strong.
world.
Qin
That's
Feiyong was
true.
shocked.
After
Could
all,
this be the full
the current
power
ancient
of the
castle
sovereign
has
divine
surpassed
weapon?
the limits
Even
of a
in this
heaven-defying
slaughter zone,
divine artifact.
This blood-red
Yi
longsword
Zhong
could
nodded.
not possibly block
Then
this
let's go.
sky dragon
Qin
godly
Feiyong
sword.
smiled.
This pressure
Qin
and this
Feiyong,
danger,
you can directly
it had
open
only
the
appeared
altar
when facing
and go
the
to the
small
inner
beast
sea
and the ice dragon.
At this moment,
Could it be?
Wang Chang's voice
After the
sounded
sovereign
in Qin
divine
Feiyong's
weapon
mind.
fully recovered,
Directly
its
open
strength
the altar,
had already reached
Qin
the level
Feiyong
of the
was
small
stunned.
beast and the
Yes.
ice dragon.
Long
He
Zun
could not
himself
help
said
but
that the
panic
reason
in his
he
heart.
couldn't open the
The
altar
small
and
beast
send
and the
messages
ice dragon
was
were
because
his
of the
most hated
sovereign divine
opponents.
weapon.
But also
Now
his
that
most
the sovereign
powerless
divine
opponents.
weapon has been
If
damaged,
the sovereign divine
these
weapon's
restrictions
power
are gone.
was really
Wang
comparable
Chang
to
said.
theirs.
Then
see.
would there be any
That's
hope
a
of
lot
winning
more
this
convenient.
battle? No.
Qin Feiyong
If he
smiled
gave up,
and opened the altar,
then not only him,
returning to the
but all
inner
the
sea
living
with Yi
beings
Zhong,
in the ancient
the
world
ancient
would
castle,
suffer the revenge
in
of
the
the
cultivation
dragons.
room.
The
Wang
fighting
Chang
spirit
looked around
in his heart
and shook
appeared
his head
again.
with a smile.
But at this moment,
I didn't expect
another
this little
voice
guy
seemed
to
to
be so
appear in his
cautious.
heart.
Yes,
What does the living
it's
beings
not
in the
without
ancient
reason that he
world
could
have
come
to do
this
with
far.
you?
You
The
can't
old
even
woman
protect
nodded.
yourself now.
Qin Feiyong
and
and
you
Yi
still
Zhong
care
didn't
about their
hide their
lives?
conversation.
This voice
So
was
they heard
ruthless and
every
cold.
word.
Am
They
I not
also
doing
knew
this
that
to
they could
protect
only
them?
stay in
To
this
give the
cultivation
ancient world
room.
peace?
Moreover,
Qin Feiyong
this
roared
was
in
a
his heart.
cultivation room on the
Peace.
second floor
Do you
of the
think there
ancient
is peace
castle.
in this world?
There was nothing
Look at the
except
current
for a few
great
old
Qin.
cushions.
Back
The
then,
burly
you
man walked to the
sacrificed so
stone
much
door
for the
and
great
tried to
Qin.
push it.
But what
he
happened
couldn't
in the
open
end?
it. Isn't there still endless conflict? He shook his head
Take your younger
regretfully
brothers
and
and
said,
sisters, for
I
example.
really want to see what the
Which
Black
one of them
Tortoise
doesn't
world is
desire
like
power and
outside.
status?
There will be a chance
So,
in the
your
future.
sacrifice
Wang
might not
Chang
be the
smiled.
result you want.
Let's recuperate
Don't be
first.
too emotional.
The battle
To you,
will
these
start
are
at
purely
any time.
burdens and burdens.
This time, we
Another
must do our
voice
best to
sounded.
make up for our sins.
Shut up.
The
I can
old
give up
woman
anything
said,
but these
yes.
emotions.
Everyone
If you
nodded.
want me to be a
In the
cold
inner
and
sea,
emotionless person,
when Qin Feiyong
then
and
I'd
Yi
rather
Zhong
die.
appeared. If a
Qin
person
Batian
doesn't have any
immediately
emotions
asked,
at all,
how is it?
then what's the difference
Let's settle
between
them
them
in
and
the
the
ancient
ancient castle's
Qin
cultivation
Feiyong
room for
roared
the
in
time
his heart.
being?
Qin
Directly
Feiyong
dispersing
said,
that voice.
Does that mean
Then
Long
he looked
Zun
up at the
already knows
dragon
that
god
they have
sword and
surrendered to
roared?
us?
I won't
Qin
give up
Batian
never.
said.
Boom.
He doesn't know
the
yet
battle
because
character
they haven't
art was
removed the
activated
control
again.
of the fate
At
contract.
the same time,
Qin Feiyong
blood
said,
continuously appeared
haven't
in the
removed
killing
it?
zone. Then you still
Crazily
dared to
surging
let them
toward the
go to the
blood-colored
ancient
sword.
castle. This blood
Qin
was the
Batian
blood
was
stored
shocked.
in the western
Qin
region
Feiyong
of the Black
smiled and
Tortoise
said,
world.
Don't
In
worry,
fact,
I've already
he didn't
arranged
need to
everything.
enter the Black Tortoise
How's
world.
the battle
He
situation
could
now?
still absorb this blood
As long
outside.
as it's arranged.
Clang. After
As a
Qin
large
Batian
amount of
said,
blood flowed
he looked
in,
at the battlefield
the
and
blood-colored
said,
sword's
the
power
strength
became
of
more
these
and
two
more
is
shocking.
really amazing.
Competing with the
Yes, they are
sharpness and aura
completely
of the
neck and
dragon
neck.
god sword.
Why didn't I realize that
crazy?
this lunatic
A
had such
supreme
terrifying
expert roared in the
potential back
dragons.
then? Even
Lu
now,
Xingyang
he
shook
still
his
hadn't
head.
given up.
Lunatic.
Even now,
He was naturally
still
no
wanted
stranger
to defeat
to
the
him.
dragon god
In the
sword.
past, in his
What kind of
opinion,
monster
madman
was
was
this?
at most a
Could it be
genius.
that the word give
But he
up
didn't expect
didn't
that
exist
after
in his
thousands of
dictionary?
years,
Was this man
lunatic would
respectable?
grow to such an extent?
Respectable.
To
Was
be
he
honest,
hateful?
now,
Hateful. Even
because
if he
his
had
goal
stepped
was to
into the
destroy the
perfect
dragon dead realm. However, he didn't have much confidence not giving up, and not giving up was admirable. That's just what you think. As for the supreme experts like He has always been a terrifying guy, as well as the million people who had submitted one day in the future. Their hearts were extremely complicated and even surpassed this moment. For the living beings of the ancient world, Lu Xingyang was stunned and said with a smile, had always been giving and working hard. I'm afraid it will take some time to even surpass if he had to sacrifice sooner or later. But what about them? Smiled they were slightly. Also humans. Wait, but they had submitted to the dragons, the two of them, harmed their own kind. He looked at Qin Batian and helped the evildoer do evil. Ancestor, in comparison, I don't deny senior brother so ashamed that they couldn't show their faces. But isn't it a little too exaggerated for him to surpass you? Chapter 29:17. After all, you control the strongest battle after soul, the continuous the eye of reincarnation. The power of the blood-red sword had reached an unprecedented level. Then do you know what Lunatic's fighting soul is? Black Tortoise World, Senior Brother Lunatic's fighting soul? At this moment, Qin Feiyang was stunned. Stood above the sea of blood. He really didn't know what Lunatic's fighting soul was among them. because
were
he had never
densely
seen
packed.
lunatic
Fire
activate
Lotus
his fighting
stood in
soul
the sky
before,
and looked at these
his fighting
creatures.
soul is also
She
terrifying.
bowed and said,
You have
thank
personally
you very
experienced
much.
Prince Dragon's
Miss Fire
realm of
Lotus,
divinity.
you don't have
it
to
is
say
considered
that.
strong.
The Lord
but
Ruler
it
gave
still
us
hasn't
crystal
reached the
veins,
level
soul
of a
veins,
heaven-defying
and countless
fighting
precious
soul.
herbs.
But
If it
lunatic
weren't for the
fighting
Lord
soul
Ruler's
is truly
selfless
comparable
help,
to a
how could we
heaven-defying
have such a
fighting
good
soul?
cultivation
Qin
environment?
Batian smiled.
Not to mention
So
such a
powerful?
comfortable life.
Qin Feiyang was
Now
shocked.
that the Lord Ruler
Let's
is in
watch
trouble,
quietly.
it's our duty
He
to
should
help
activate
him.
his fighting
Pai
soul
Lupi
later.
roared.
All
Qin
the
Batian
humans and
smiled.
beasts nodded.
Theta Wang said, Isn't it just donating blood? As
Chapter
he spoke,
29,
he looked at all the
25.
creatures and
Qin
roared.
Feiyang heard
Brothers,
this and
friends,
looked up at the
with our
battlefield.
cultivation, he couldn't
No
help
matter
but
how
look
much
forward
blood we
to it.
donate,
After
our
knowing
lives
each
will
other
not
for
be in
so
danger.
many years,
But the
Lord
madman
Ruler
hadn't
is different.
even activated
He
his
is fighting
battle
with the
soul
Lord
once.
Ruler's weapon
How
outside.
heaven-defying was he
Although
to be
most
so
of us
secretive?
don't know how strong
Clang,
the Lord Ruler's
rumble,
weapon is,
high up
with
in the
the
sky.
word ruler,
Every time
it's
the
not hard
madman
to
and
imagine
Prince
that
Dragons
it's definitely
clashed,
not weaker
there would
than
be
the
a
Lord
loud
Ruler.
explosion.
Facing
Especially
such a
the
weapon,
Blood Demon Tower
the Lord
and
Ruler
Sacred
will
Dragon
lose his
Sword.
life if he's not
Every
careful.
time the two
He's fighting
heaven-defying
on the front
artifacts
line,
collided,
so we have
it
to
would
be
be
a
a
scene
strong
of
backing.
destruction.
We
Enough
have
to
to
tell
tell
the
the
Lord
breaths
Ruler
passed.
that he's not fighting
Suddenly,
alone.
he
With a
has
loud
us.
crack,
Live
the
and die
two
together,
heaven-defying
share
artifacts
trials and
cracked at the same
tribulations
time,
together,
and their divine
At the
light
end,
dimmed. Theta Wang
both
couldn't
sides
help
are
but
injured.
roar.
Prince
His voice
Dragons
was like a
frowned.
bell that
I'm
resounded
also
in all
quite
directions.
surprised.
The
Live and
madman
die
put away the
together,
Blood Demon
share
Tower
trials
and
and
waved
tribulations
his hand.
together.
The fifth style
All the
blood
creatures
prison
present were also
instantly
affected by
appeared in
Pai
shrouded
Lupi
Prince
and Theta
Dragons,
Wang's emotions
facing
and
blood
roared.
prison.
Okay,
Prince
let's
Dragons
bleed.
didn't dare
Pai
to be
Lupi
careless
and Theta Wang waved
because
their
he had
hands
already
and cut their wrists
experienced the
first.
power of blood
Blood
prison.
immediately
The
splashed
power
out
of blood
and
prison
gathered in the sea of
self-destruction
blood below.
was even more terrifying than a life
Seeing this,
form of the same
the others
realm.
and beasts
A barrier
also began
flickered
to
with
bleed.
divine light appeared,
Especially the beasts.
God's domain.
With their huge
Yes,
bodies,
he had
the
activated
blood in
his
their
divine
bodies
ability,
was several times
rendering
more than
all
that of
divine
humans.
abilities useless.
Blood gushed out.
Just as
In
blood
just an
prison
instant,
entered the God's
the
domain,
sky above the blood
it directly
sea was dyed red
dissipated
with
blood.
Damn,
Fire Lotus's
what a shameless
face was
innate
filled
ability.
with gratitude
The
when she
madman
saw
was
this.
annoyed.
She
But
said
you can't deny
telepathically,
its power.
Chindage,
The
with
prince
us
of the
here,
dragon
you can
clan
fight
said
without
with a
worry.
smile.
Outside,
It is very strong.
Upon hearing the Fire
But what if
Lotus's
it's a law
voice,
profound?
Qin
The
Feiyang
madman
extended
smiled
his
coldly,
perception to
and
the
a
western
monstrous
region.
killing intent
Looking at
erupted.
that scene,
Clang.
he felt
The next
extremely
moment,
grateful. A
the blood in
blood-colored
his body
sword couldn't
appeared,
help but boil,
as if it was made of
not
blood,
strong enough,
emitting a terrifying
Continue.
bloody aura.
Blood gushed into the
Sword
blood-red
of slaughter.
sword.
Clang.
Following the madman's
The blood-red
roar,
sword trembled
the sword of slaughter
continuously.
suddenly swept
Its
up a
sharpness
blood-colored
becoming more and
wave,
more shocking.
carrying an
Qin
apocalyptic
Feiyang
sharpness
himself was
as
like
it
a demon
slashed at the
king.
god's domain.
His long blood-red
With a
hair
loud
fluttered
bang,
in the wind,
the god's domain
and his
shattered.
blood-red eyes
Then,
emitted a
the
shockingly
sword of
vicious
slaughter
aura.
slashed
Die.
furiously at the dragon
The
prince.
celestial dragon god
Sword of
sword
slaughter
suddenly roared.
Qin Feiyang
and
muttered.
99 heavenly
Sword of
dragons
slaughter
tore
is the
through
first
the primal
profound
chaos,
divine ability of
carrying
the law
the
of
power
slaughter
to destroy the world.
Qin
as they
Batian
madly
said,
attacked Qin
I have to
Feiyang.
admit that this kid
I
is
won't
truly
die,
a monster,
and I won't lose
he's
to
still
you,
so young,
because there are
yet
billions
he's already
of living
comprehended
beings
his
behind
first
me.
profound
What
ability.
do you have?
Yi Zhong
Qin
shook his
Feiyang
head.
roared angrily.
Yeah,
Clang.
it's true that the new
blood-red
generation
sword
excels
trembled
the old.
violently.
Supreme
and a
cloud and
destructive
supreme
aura
beast
erupted.
could not help but sigh.
Kill. Boom.
Following a
The
hysterical
prince of the
roar,
dragons was
Qin
shocked
Feiyang
when his
grabbed the
divinity
blood-red
domain
sword
was
with both
forcibly
hands
broken
and
The
slashed
power
at the
of laws
celestial
was
dragon
indeed
god
worthy
sword,
of being called
Roar.
the strongest
The
power
sound
in
of
the
the
world.
sword was mixed
The
with a
threat
loud
that the sword
dragon's
of
roar,
slaughter brought to
as the
him
blood
was
energy
simply
surged.
unprecedentedly
99
intense.
blood dragons
However,
appeared and
lunatics
danced around
weren't
the
the
blood-red
only ones
sword,
with profound
and a
divine
terrifying
abilities.
aura shook the
Boom.
surroundings.
A sacred
This
aura
sword
burst
could
out,
destroy all things.
following closely.
Clang, with a
Boom.
clang. In
A
an
pure
instant,
white longsword
the two
appeared out of
divine
thin
weapons
air.
collided with
The
a
sword
loud
exuded
bang.
a world
The
destroying
99
sharpness,
blood dragons
and
and
a divine
99
radiance
heavenly dragons
enveloped the
also
entire
collided
area.
and fought crazily. This was a shocking scene.
This is the sword of
Whether
light.
it was Long
Qin
Zun and the
Feiyang
others,
exclaimed,
or Yi
That's
Zhong
right.
and the others
It
from
is
the
indeed
Black
the
Tortoise
first
world,
profound divine
they couldn't
ability
help
of the
but
law of
tremble.
light.
Even
the sword
they
of
couldn't
light.
interfere in a
He's
battle
actually
of
the
this
same
level,
as you,
let
mastering
alone
the law
ordinary
of light.
people. Yi
No,
Zhong was shocked.
This was no longer a question of whether they could interfere or not. Master, they couldn't even get close to such a battle. Why do you seem to have only just found out that he has mastered the law of light? Heaven-defying divine the Prince of the Dragons has always been cultivating in seclusion in the Dragon Palace, and this was the enemy Qin Feiyang was facing at this moment. So this old man doesn't know much about him. The celestial dragon god after saying an invincible king. Yizhong paused for a moment before continuing. As the intense battle continued, not only this old man, the 99 heavenly dragons probably don't know much about dragons began to collapse. So mysterious, blood light and milky white divine light dyed the surroundings. This old man guesses at the same time should not be limited the blood red longsword. For you and the heavenly dragon divine sword also had cracks all over them. Yizhong said, "Who can tell us the situation of the battle on the sacred mountain of divine dragon island?" At the same time, the weaker dragons couldn't see the battle clearly and mastered the law of light. And he
They're
has even
evenly
comprehended his first profound divine ability,
and his tone was extremely heavy.
This?
What?
The various
They're
ancestral
actually
dragons
evenly
were also shocked.
Everyone was shocked.
Not to mention
the
you.
celestial
Even
dragon
this
god
lord
sword
is not
had
aware.
already awakened to
Long
such an
Zun
extent,
snorted coldly,
and Qin
even you
Feiyang
don't
was
know.
still able to match
The various ancestral
Monster,
dragons
what a
looked at
monster.
Long Zun in
At
shock.
the same time,
The celestial
Long Zun
dragon
nodded
god
and
said
said
helplessly,
weapon spirit was also
this child
shocked.
has been like this
Not only
since
was
he was
the power
young.
of the slaughter
no matter
domain
what he
strong,
encounters,
but
he
it was
doesn't
also
like to tell
continuing
others
to grow stronger.
In that case,
this had already
even you
far
don't know his
exceeded
highness's
its
strength.
expectations.
Black
It
Dragon
didn't want to
Ancestral
admit it,
Dragon said,
but it had to
Long
admit
Zun pondered
that this
for a
young
moment
man in
and
front
said,
of it was
in
indeed
the
an
past,
amazing
this
figure.
lord felt that I
Roar.
understood him
With
very
the last
well.
dragon roar.
After all,
the
he
celestial
is my
dragon
child,
god
but
sword
now,
and Qin
seeing him
Feiyang
reveal the
retreated
law
at the
of
same
light,
time.
this lord
Whether
really
it was the
doesn't dare to
celestial
say.
dragon god sword,
His Highness,
or
our
the blood
prince,
red sword
is really
in Qin
hiding
Feiyang's
his strength.
hand.
The
The
white-robed
white-robed
woman
woman
shook her
wounds.
head and smiled bitterly.
And those 99
hiding
blood
his strength.
dragons and 99 heavenly
Long Zun
dragons
snorted
had also
coldly and
completely
didn't hide
dissipated.
He
That's
even hid
right.
it from this lord.
This confrontation
Looks like
ended
his wings
in a
have
draw.
hardened.
This
and he
made the
wants to
celestial
rebel.
dragon god
The
sword
various
very
ancestral
angry.
dragons
A dignified
looked at each other
sovereign
and
divine
shook their
weapon was
heads.
actually forced
Long
to
Zun
such an
was
extent
obviously
by a
saying
human
one thing
It was
and
simply
thinking
a great
another.
humiliation.
He was obviously
I
very
won't forgive
pleased in
you.
his
I won't
heart.
forgive you.
But he didn't
Rule
admit
of
it.
sword
In the
domain.
blink of an eye,
The furious
as soon as the
celestial
sword of
dragon
light
god
appeared,
sword released
Prince
waves of
Dragons
terrifying
grabbed it in
sword
his
chi.
hand
And
and
soon as
slashed at
the
the
sword
sword
chi
appeared.
appeared,
They
divine light
intertwined
filled
and
the
formed
sky
a
as
huge
the sword
domain.
chi roared.
Instantly
It was as if
enveloping
thousands
Qin
of
Feiyang.
gods and Buddhas
Rule
were
of
chanting
sword.
as a sacred
Qin Feiyang
aura
was
enveloped
shocked.
heaven and earth.
What's there to be
The
shocked
sword of
about?
slaughter was
Even
completely
a
heaven-defying
different.
divine
Blood
weapon
light
has the
filled the
power
sky
of
as
law,
baleful
let
auras
alone a
surged.
sovereign divine
It was like
weapon
the incarnation of
Have a
thousands
taste
of
of the
corpse
terror
demons.
of the sword
The
domain.
two profound
Sword
abilities
domain
clashed.
opened.
And
The
heaven and
celestial
earth
dragon
fell
god
into a
sword
deathly
roared,
silence at
and
this
immediately
moment.
appeared
Boom.
in the center of
But
the
in the
sword
next
domain.
instant,
Boom.
a loud
Immediately
explosion that
after,
shook the skies
a beam of
suddenly
divine
exploded.
light burst out. The calm sword domain
A terrifying
seemed to have been
destructive
activated
aura
in an
surged
instant,
out like a tide,
erupting with a
Puff,
monstrous power.
Frenzy and Prince
in the next
Dragons
instant,
immediately spat out a
countless
mouthful
sword
of
chi
blood
emerged from the
and
sword
flew
domain,
back at the same time,
each containing
I
the
admit
power
that you
to
are
destroy
really
the
strong.
world.
As
But
if
the
it
winner
could
of this
shatter a
battle
piece
will
of heaven
definitely
and
be
earth.
me.
At the
Prince
same
Dragon
time, these sword chi
stabilized his
emerged.
body,
Qin
and his
Feiyang
words were
suddenly
filled
felt
with
a
a
sense of
monstrous
horror in his
domineering
heart.
aura.
Not
As
only
his
did
voice
his
fell,
body sink into
divine
a
light
quagmire,
surged out,
unable to move,
and his entire body
even
was
his
enveloped
divine
in a
soul
layer
was
of
terrified.
sacred light. The
It was
sharpness
as
of
if
the
a
sword
god had
chi
descended,
seemed to be able to ignore all defenses,
Frenzy stabilized
and
himself in
directly
the
threaten
air,
his divine
and
soul,
raised his head to look
Human,
at Prince
prepare to
Dragons.
face your doom.
The murderous
The
aura that
celestial
flowed out of
dragon
his
god
body
sword
became
roared,
more and more
and the
shocking.
sword chi suspended in the sword domain
the prince of
suddenly
the dragon
turned into a
clan
torrent,
nodded with great
drowning
confidence.
Qin Feiyang. He slowly
Shatter
raised
them
his
for
arm
me.
and said,
A fatal
"Accept
sense
your
of danger
judgment,
rose
sword
in
of
his heart.
judgment."
Qin
Clang.
Feiyang roared.
Before his voice
But the
fell,
hand holding the
the law of
blood-colored
light
sword
appeared,
could not be
and
lifted
a
at
divine
all,
sword that
as
was
if it was
dozens of
frozen.
feet long appeared.
Whoosh.
Prince
sword
Dragon
chi swept
grabbed the
over,
sword hilt,
directly
and shook it
passing
slightly
through the sword domain.
A sonorous sound
piercing
came from
through
the
the
armor
sword,
formed by
and
the
a mighty
battle
aura
symbol
surged
out, and piercing
This
through
is
Qin Feiyang's
the
chest.
second profound
A bloody
ability of
hole
the law of
appeared,
light,
and blood
sword of
splattered
judgment.
everywhere. Qin Batian
strong?
exclaimed. Qin Feiyang
The
was
second
shocked.
profound ability.
Before he could react,
Qin Feiyang's
a
eyes
few more
trembled
sword
when he
chi
heard
swept
this.
over.
He had
And a
actually
few more
comprehended
blood
the
holes
second
appeared on his
profound
body.
ability.
Directly
Didn't that
passing
mean that
through
Prince
the sword
Dragon's
domain,
law of light
it seems
had
that
already
these sword
reached the
chi
small
can really
success
ignore
stage?
all defenses.
The power of law had
Qin
a total
Feiyang's
of
face
6
was
stages.
gloomy, but his
Beginner,
mind was
initial
extremely
small
calm.
success.
The power
Great
of law,
success, perfection,
since
and
the
great
sword domain was
perfection.
evolved from
At
the
initial
power of
success
law,
stage,
could it also
one
be
could
broken by the
comprehend the
power
first
of law?
profound ability,
Thinking of this,
which was the sword
he
of light.
decisively activated
Only
the
after
law of
comprehending
light.
it to the
Clang.
small success
A pure
stage,
white longsword
would one be able to
materialized
grasp
in the
the
air.
second type of
Profound
meaning,
divine ability.
sword of light.
Who would have
The
thought that
longsword
Prince
shone
Dragons
brightly,
had actually
carrying
hidden
a
it so
sacred
deeply?
aura, and
Recalling
slashed
the
at the
last
sword
time
chi.
he fought with him,
Crack.
he hadn't used
However,
the law of light.
the sword of light
the
did not
style
help
of the
Qin
heavenly
Feiyang at
dragon
all.
art.
Instead,
Moon,
the sword
or
of
the
light
sixth
was
style,
crushed by the sword
shield
chi.
of
mystic moon.
Not bad.
These were all super
You have
terrifying
actually
techniques.
comprehended the profound
For example,
meaning ability.
the fifth style
However,
seal
with
moon
your second
had the
stage
ability
power
to
of
protect
law,
the soul.
can it be compared
Even the
to my
soul
power of law?
extermination technique
The celestial
probably
dragon
couldn't
god
break it,
sword laughed
because
contemptuously.
the soul extermination
Whoosh.
technique
A
was
few
similar
more
to the blood
passed
prison
through the sword
which
domain
ignored all
and
external
pierced through
defenses.
Qin Feiyang's body.
Since Seal Moon
In a
could
short
block
while,
the blood prison's
Qin Feiyang's
obliteration,
body was
it
like
could
a sieve
naturally
that was
block
riddled
the
with
soul
holes.
extermination
Blood was
technique.
spurting out
And
from
the
his
sixth
body
style
nonstop.
shield of Mystic Moon
Quickly absorb
had
it,
absolute
quickly absorb
defense.
it.
After
Qin
all,
Feiyang roared in his
even
heart.
Wang Ming had
The blood in
personally
the Black
admitted
Tortoise realm
that
was
even
still
the shield of
pouring into the
invincibility
blood-colored long
couldn't
sword.
compare to this
The
shield
power
of
of
Mystic
law was
Moon.
not comparable
And the
to the
profound
celestial
ability of
dragon
the law
god
of
sword.
light was
So he could
undoubtedly
only
more
rely on the
powerful
sword
than
domain
these
now.
divine arts.
Only by
Sword
constantly
of light,
absorbing blood,
sword of judgment,
and making the sword domain
at that
stronger,
moment,
Prince
Prince
Dragons
forcefully
really
break
was
the
like a
shackles
god
of the
descending
sword
to
domain.
earth.
Holding
Quick.
the sword
It
of
must be
judgment to
quick.
judge sinners.
Clang.
The blood-colored long sword was buzzing and trembling. He has even comprehended getting more and more divine ability. Whoosh. It was also at this moment. It looks like there's no suspense in this battle. A few of them even went straight for Qin Feiyang's glabella. Ancestral dragon black dragon laughed heartily. The place that led the other 9 ancestral dragons, as well as the supreme experts behind them. The sea of consciousness and divine soul even would be destroyed. Face, in fact, which was shrouded in mist, divine soul and divine smile would be destroyed. This child was still hiding but at this critical moment. The aura of the blood was also laughing. Suddenly, but his laughter was full of ridicule. A world-destroying aura burst forth from his body. Profound ability that great crack. Madman's domain was shattered on the spot by this slaughter. Instantly, Qin Feiyang finally regained his freedom. Clang! He immediately held the blood-colored long sword and slashed out. Several zhang-long appeared out of nowhere. Collapsed. Monstrous killing intent. The hope of all the living beings in the entire world is on me. At that moment, how can I let them down? He was wreathed in blood-red flames. And the miserable blood-colored hair fluttered as reverberated around him. Celestial dragon. It was as if a god of slaughter had returned. No one knew how strong the blood-colored long sword was. Madman himself did not know, grabbed the god-killing sword, that this blood-colored long sword Prince Dragon definitely step by step. The celestial dragon god-killing sword, the second profound ability. All of this happened in a flash. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. The celestial dragon god sword did not even have time to react. Of the law of slaughter. As the blood-colored long sword that Madman had personally said that the law of slaughter, the celestial dragon god sword was immediately broken in half. At the same time, this is impossible. Looking at this scene, Longzuan's eyes widened in anger. Supremacy, the various ancestral dragons were also extremely shocked. What kind of monsters were these? What? At such a young age, looked at them in surprise. Each of them had comprehended the third stage of a law of slaughter. Chapter 29:18. This made these old fellows feel so ashamed that they were unable to show their faces, or the ancestral dragons glanced at Madman. None of them answered. Then looked at their gazes were locked onto the battlefield. Sure enough, I didn't understand why you value this little madman so much. The Prince of the Dragons also looked at Qin Feiyang on the battlefield. It's all within my expectations. And the smile in his eyes if it wasn't for his adoptive father's death that caused him to waste so many years. The Princess of the Dragons noticed the expression of the Prince of the Dragons, smiled, and was immediately furious. Qin Feiyang shook his head. The Prince of the Dragons said, Sister, you don't understand, and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Although talking Yuan's death made him depressed for a long time, frowned. It also made him even more terrifying. The Prince of the Dragons looked at the Princess of the Dragons, just like the blood demon without saying a word. He created it during that period of time. Impossible. The law of slaughter was also upgraded to the second stage at that time. How can I be defeated in the hands of a little human? Hearing this, the dragon god sword that was cut in two muttered to itself. This should be the so-called good preparation. Its tone was full of anger and hostility. Qin Feiyang nodded. Frankly I said that I'm not fighting alone. The strength that Madman had displayed was really beyond imagination. As long as they are here, he had an indescribable feeling. And whether it was Madman or Prince Dragon endlessly, it seemed that no matter if I become a demon in the end, as long as I can destroy you, everything is worth it. The last blow, chapter 29:26, destroyed for me. Slaughter Law's second held the blood-colored sword with both hands. At the same time. Although Prince Dragons looked at the god-slaying sword in the madman's hand full of weakness and fell into shock. His aura was like a rainbow. He knew better than anyone how difficult it was to comprehend the power of loss. You're courting death. He originally thought that he was the only one in the younger generation, and the two halves of the sword shone brightly, profound ability, crazily attacking Qin Feiyang. This was the reason why he could look down on everyone. Qin Feiyang did not retreat at all. That the madman would also comprehend the second profound ability. You think you've won? This was undoubtedly an invisible blow to him. You're still far from it, because this meant that there was a monster in this world that could compete with the heavenly dragon divine sword. The madman's killing intent surged as he approached, and the sword domain appeared once again. Prince Dragons took a deep breath instantly and calmed the fluctuations in his heart. Qin Feiyang's brows like a madman and said, "At that moment, in my opinion, Qin Feiyang felt a fatal threat was worthy of being my opponent. This threat actually came from the soul. What about now? Needless to say, this soul sees now there's naturally the same as the soul extermination technique. I believe that the future all defenses and directly erase one's dragons revealed a smile." Even this was a kind of gratification. Did not back down in a person's life. There was only one chance. It was hard to meet opponents. If the dragon god sword was given a chance to breathe. But now he met two at once. Who knew how long this battle would last? This came from the bottom of his heart. There was no dragon god sword would turn defeat into victory. He wasn't jealous of the strength and talent that the madman displayed. The dragon god sword. This was the mentality that an expert should have. The two collided. Jealousy was a sign of the weak. The dragon god sword shattered. Come. At the same time, let's all use our strength without holding back and fight with all our strength. And an aura of death suddenly enveloped him. The dragon race prince held the sword of judgment and charged at Madman. He could not help but scream. The two clashed
Even
in
if
the
you
air
destroy
again.
this body,
Two profound
you will
abilities.
not be able
Their
to escape
sharpness
death.
could destroy the world.
Dragon God Sword's
Seeing
artifacts
this,
spirit
Qin Fei Yang
laughed
couldn't
loudly,
help
but
wanted
its
to give it a
words were
try.
weak and powerless.
At the same time,
Furthermore,
he felt a
the
little
shattered
disappointment.
fragments also
They were
dimmed.
both from the younger
Obviously,
generation.
This was
But
already
the
the
madman
limit
and
of the
Prince
Dragon
Dragon
God
sword.
had both
It
comprehended
no longer
a
had
second
the power
profound
to
ability.
fight.
What's
But there
there
to fear about
He had
death?
only comprehended a
Senior
first
brother
profound
madman.
ability.
Don't
The
forget
gap
your
was
promise
quite
to
big.
me.
You
Don't
must
be
destroy the
discouraged.
dragons.
In terms
Qin
of
Fei Yang
age,
whispered.
you're much younger
The
than them.
formless power ignored
Qin
all
Batian
defenses
said with a
and went
comforting
straight
smile.
for the soul.
To be honest,
Don't worry,
the lunatic
I will
was
do what
actually
I
someone
say.
from the same
Inside
era
the
as
Black
Qin
Tortoise
Batian.
world.
In
Looking
terms
at
of
Qin Fei
seniority,
Yang, who was about
Qin
to
Fei
die,
Yang was one
Madman
generation
clenched
lower
his
than
fists.
Madman.
Therefore,
Qin
in Qin
Batian's
Batian's eyes,
Fire Lotus
Qin
and
Fei
the
Yang
others
was
were
not
also
at all
silently
inferior to
shedding
Madman
tears.
and Prince
Clang.
Dragons.
But
He was
just when
even
everyone
more
thought
outstanding
that
than
Qin
the
Fei
two
Yang
of
was
them.
dead for sure.
It's not that
A
I'm
dull loud
discouraged.
sound suddenly
I just don't want to
exploded in
lose
Qin
to
Fei
them.
Yang's sea of
Qin Fei Yang
consciousness.
shook his head.
You
didn't lose.
Qin Fei Yang
Because
himself
no
was
matter
also
if it's
shocked
the lunatics
and
or the
hurriedly
princes
looked
of
inside
dragons
his sea of
at your
consciousness.
stage. They didn't have
Immediately,
the same
Qin
achievements
Fei
as
Yang
you
saw
do
an
now.
unbelievable scene.
Qin Batian
In his
smiled.
sea of consciousness,
Qin Fei Yang smiled
there was a
bitterly.
blood-colored word
So should I be
floating.
proud?
Battle.
Proud.
This was the
That
battle
won't do.
formula.
Qin
Boom.
Batian shook his head and
Immediately
laughed.
after.
To tell
This
the
battle
truth,
word collapsed
Qin
and
Fei
turned
Yang
into a
indeed had the
blood-colored
right to be
divine
proud,
light,
surging with that formless power.
because
Qin Fei
if he
Yang's
didn't
sea of
count the time in the
consciousness
castle
immediately
and the
turned
Black
into a
Tortoise realm,
battlefield.
the
Qin Fei Yang
blood-colored
hadn't
divine
even
light
been on the path
and the
of
formless
cultivation
power
for
continued
1,000
to
years.
clash.
Evenly
Just
matched.
think about it.
Buzz.
In this world,
all of a sudden,
who could step
another
into the
golden
half-step
light
invincible
emerged.
realm
In the
such a
golden
short
light,
time?
there was a
It could
return
be
word
said that no one could do
return
it.
formula.
However,
Qin
a
Fei Yang's
proud
attitude
attitude
would
would
make
make
people
people arrogant.
What was going on?
So this
He
was
had
definitely
mastered the
not
six-word
something that
formula
could be
for
done.
many years.
Ancestor,
But this was
what
the
do you
first
plan to
time
do
he
after
saw the
this
battle
battle?
formula and
Qin
return
Fei Yang
formula
suddenly
take the
asked.
initiative to
After
attack.
it's over,
And the power
Qin
was
Batian
even
murmured
stronger
and
than
smiled.
before. If
One
I can
must know
survive,
that the
of
strength
course
of
I'll
the
go
dragon
home and
god
have a look.
sword,
After
Qin
its
Fei
full
Yang
recovery,
said,
then
was something
grandfather
that only
and
the
great-grandfather
great-grandfather
will
could
definitely
contend
be very
against.
happy. But now,
Speaking of
the
them,
return
I
formula
feel
and
quite
battle
guilty.
formula
One
were
is my
able to
son,
compete
the
with
other
the
is my
formless
grandson.
power.
What
But
did
I
this
have never
mean?
fulfilled
It
my
meant that the
responsibility
power of
as
the
a
return
father or
formula and battle
grandfather.
formula
Qin
was not
Batian
much
shook his
weaker
head.
than the slaughter
They
domain.
won't blame you.
Buzz,
Qin Fei Yang
suddenly,
said.
another
Qin
divine
Batian
light
shook his
emerged,
head and smiled.
and there was the attainment
The result
word
of this
inside.
battle is still
Attainment
unknown.
formula.
Let's talk about
the three
it after it's
heaven-defying
really
formulas
over.
turned into
Qin
three
Fei Yang
divine
looked at
lights,
Qin Batian,
constantly
and
pouncing
secretly
on the
swore in
formless
his heart
power,
that he
after
must
a
win
few
this battle.
breaths.
That
Furthermore,
formless energy
everyone
was
around
actually
him had to
forcefully
survive.
destroyed by the
He
three
didn't
great
want to
divine
taste the
arts.
pain of his family,
This,
friends,
Qin Fei
and
Yang was
brothers
shocked.
dying in battle
The dragon
again.
god sword also
Clang.
felt extremely
Gotcha.
shocked when it
High
sensed
up
the
in the sky,
disappearance of the formless
Madman
power,
and the Prince of
and
Dragons
fought until
What
the
level
sky
of
turned
formula
dark.
is this?
Blood was
If it's
spurting
just
out
a
from their
heaven-defying
bodies.
formula,
But for them,
it can't be
this kind
strong.
of injury was nothing.
Qin Fei Yang
The
really
more they
didn't know
fought,
how to answer,
the braver they became.
In the past,
Blood
he had
Demon
always
Domain,
thought that the six-word
Heavenly Dragon
formula was a
Domain,
heaven-defying
Blood
formula.
Prison, God's Domain.
However, the
Sky
strength of the
Halberd,
slaughter domain,
God-slaying art,
and the
whether it
extraordinary
was profound
performance
divine
of the attainment,
abilities or divine
battle,
arts,
and return
they had all
formulas,
been unleashed to
proved
the extreme,
that they had surpassed
However,
the limits of
although it was a
heaven-defying
life and death
formulas.
battle,
The most
both of
important
them
thing
had
was,
respect for each
why
other in
didn't
their
the battle,
eyes. This
attainment,
battle
and
had
return
already lasted
formulas
for
have
half
such
an hour.
amazing
They
performance.
were covered in wounds
Was it the
and
kill
blood dyed
formula
the sky
that had always
but
been
the
in
two
the
of them were
limelight?
still lively.
Could it be that the
and there
power
wasn't
of the
the
battle,
slightest bit of
attainment,
weakness
and
in their
return
expressions
formulas
had not been
If
completely
it weren't for our
revealed?
different positions,
However,
we
we
shouldn't
shouldn't be
care
able
so
to
much
become
now.
friends.
Qin
The
Fei
Prince
Yang
of
grabbed the
Dragons
blood-colored
laughed.
sword.
I believe that
and
we will
once
still
again
be very
slashed
good
at the
friends.
fragments of the dragon
Madman
god
echoed
sword.
with a smile.
To cut the
The
grass,
Prince of
one
Dragons
must
said
remove the
regretfully.
roots.
The Dragon God
Unfortunately,
sword must
we
not
both
be
have
left
something
behind,
to protect.
because once
Yes,
the Dragon God
for their
sword
sake,
is restored,
the outcome of
there
this
will be
battle
big
must
trouble
be
in the
decided.
future.
Be
Most
prepared.
importantly,
Full power.
after fighting with the
Madman
Dragon
god sword for so long, and a monstrous aura broke out from his body, and he was already following an arrow closely at the end of its flight. Under everyone's shocked gaze, if it wasn't for his astonishing cultivation began to soar again. In just an instant, he must completely get rid of this disaster before he fainted. Stage of the undead realm. Damn it! What? The dragon god of dragons expression changed. And this is the true blood demon. The chaos zone immediately rushed towards the sacred mountain of the divine dragon island. It actually is slaying sword slash sovereign divine weapons. Escaping was a kind of humiliation. The prince of dragons muttered, couldn't care so much. The blood-colored sword was looking at the madman at this moment. With its current state, he even had an illusion. There was no possibility of winning. This person was even more terrifying than Qin Fei Yang. The judgment sword used the attainment formula and chased crazily, but it was no longer a match for the god-slaying sword. At this moment, with a crack, a space tunnel appeared in front of the dragon god sword. Was one small realm higher than the dragon god sword immediately rushed into the space tunnel and disappeared. This
Long
guy,
Zun.
what other shocking
Qin
means is
Feiyong
he
roared
hiding?
and rushed towards
Qin
the divine
Feiyong
dragon
clenched his
island
fists
with murderous intent.
to actually increase
This
his
was the law of
cultivation by
space in
3
time.
small realms.
Obviously,
this was too
it was
unexpected.
Long Zun who saved
What
the
should we
dragon
do?
god sword.
His Highness
However,
is no longer the
Qin
madman's
Feiyong
opponent.
didn't fly very
The
far
Prince
before
of Dragons
he
were all
and fell from
panicking
the
at this
sky.
moment.
An
Even the
unprecedented
revered
weakness
dragons
appeared
were
in his
extremely
heart.
nervous.
His consciousness
In just a
was
few
quickly
breaths,
swallowed by the
the
darkness.
Prince of Dragons was
and the
heavily
killing
injured,
domain and the
his
blood-colored
entire
sword
body
was
were also
bleeding.
dissipating.
There was even a deep sword wound on
Qin
his
Feiyong
body
had
that
also
revealed
reached
his
his limit.
bones.
His
The
whole
outcome
body
has
was
been
weak and
decided.
powerless.
The madman
His body,
took a
which
step
was
forward,
riddled with holes,
and like a
was
demon
still
god
bleeding
descending.
non-stop.
The god-slaying sword
It was
shattered
also
in
at
all
this
directions.
moment.
Madman
Immediately,
and Fire Lotus
the Prince
appeared.
of the Dragon
Madman
clan
hugged Qin
sensed a
Feiyong.
fatal danger
I'm
sweeping
sorry,
over him.
I couldn't
But
completely
at
destroy
this
the
moment,
dragon
he
god
didn't
sword.
panic at all.
Qin Feiyong
You're
muttered,
really too strong.
"It's okay.
The current
dragon god sword is
afraid
already
that even
broken.
the ancestral
Now it's
dragons
just like a
aren't your
piece of
opponent.
trash. I really
Leave
like
the rest
you more
to
and
me.
more." Madman
If you can
laughed.
join the dragons,
Please,
together with
Qin
Qin
Feiyong
Feiyong,
smiled slightly.
our dragons will
Then his
definitely
head
be
tilted
immortal.
and he fainted.
Unfortunately,
Qin Dage,
I know
Fire
that this
Lotus
is a
shouted.
dream that will never
Madman
be realized.
comforted her.
The Prince
It's
of
okay.
Dragons'
He's
heart
just
fluctuated.
temporarily unconscious.
This was the most terrifying
Take him to the black
opponent
tortoise
he had ever
world to
encountered in
recover.
his life.
Okay.
That heart of cherishing
Fire
talent
Lotus
was
nodded
difficult
and
to
took Qin
suppress.
Feiyong from Madman's
Since you know
hands
that this
and
is a
disappeared
dream
without
that will never
trace.
be realized,
Madman
then
raised
what are
his
you
head
still saying?
and looked in the
Lousy
direction
knows
of the
that you
divine
still have a
dragon
trump
island.
card.
A monstrous
show it to
baleful
Lousy.
aura suddenly
The
broke out
madman
from his
roared
body and slashed at
"Dragons,
the Prince of
your
Dragon
end is
God's
here."
head.
In an
All
instant,
right. Madman seemed to have changed into
the
a
Prince
different
of Dragons
person.
took a step
His entire
forward,
body was
and a
surrounded by
terrifying
blood
ice
and
force
baleful
roared
aura
out
from his body.
Following closely,
At the same time,
he stepped towards
ice
the
crystals
divine
and
dragon
flames
island
rose
step by
from the
step.
ground and surrounded
Black
his
Tortoise
body.
World.
This
Feiyong.
is the madman
Fire
looked
Lotus
at the Prince
appeared
of
with
Dragons
Qin
in
Feiyong.
shock.
The mermaid
Not only the
princess
madman,
and the others
but
immediately
Qin Feiyong
surrounded
and
them.
the others were also
Their faces
shocked,
full of worry.
because
It's
at this
okay.
moment,
He's just
the
unconscious.
flame on the Prince of Dragon's
Fire
body
Lotus said in a low
was no
voice,
longer the power
then
of the
handed
Sky
Qin
Dragon
Feiyong to the mermaid
Moreover,
princess and said,
at this moment,
"Take good care
the
of
Prince
him."
of Dragon's temperament
Okay.
had completely
Mermaid
changed.
princess nodded.
All along,
Fire Lotus
the
raised
Prince
her
of
head
Dragons had
and
been
looked
like
at
a
the image in the
transcendent
air,
and sacred son
looking
of
at
God
Madman's
in everyone's
back in the
impression.
image.
There
But
was
now,
a trace of
he was like
relief
a
in her
demon
eyes.
god transformed.
This kid was no
That
longer the
sacred
little
aura
guy
could no
who
longer
only
be
knew how to
found,
mess around all
and it
day.
was filled with
He had
indifference,
already grown up
ruthlessness,
and become
cold
very mature.
bloodedness.
He was
What's going
already
on with
capable
you?
of shouldering
The
this
madman
heavy
frowned.
burden. This is
Schwa.
another me. Fire Lotus
Prince
looked
of
at the little
Dragons
boy
spoke.
and shouted,
"Another you?"
quickly
The
controlled the
madman was
Black
stunned.
Tortoise World and
That's
followed.
right.
Although
I'm
Fire
different from
Lotus
other
had the
divine
authority
dragons.
to freely enter
I was born
and
with
exit
two
the Black
souls.
Tortoise World, she couldn't control it. But the little boy could. Hearing this, the little boy immediately controlled the Black Tortoise World and chased after Madman. Although Madman was powerful now, he was only a half step undying after all. He couldn't face all the dragons alone. At the same time, the shattering of the dragon god sword meant that the battle with the dragons had officially begun. Sacred Mountain. At this moment it was dead silent. Whether it was the dragons or the humans, they all looked at the shattered pieces of the dragon god sword floating in the air with heavy expressions. No one would have thought that the final outcome would
One
be
is
the
the
defeat
soul
of the dragon god sword,
and the other
even
is
such
the
a
soul
powerful
of the ice
existence
dragon.
like the ruler
The
divine
sky dragon's
weapon
soul
was
is
defeated
inherited
from
from
my
my
mother,
mother,
and
then
the
the
ice dragon's
definitely
soul
couldn't
is
do it.
inherited from
For
my
a
father.
moment,
The
the
difference
entire
is that the
sacred
sky
mountain
dragon's
was
soul
shrouded
is
in
more
an
atmosphere
atmosphere
of despair,
and the ice dragon's
although
soul
I
is
lost
more
to him.
brutal.
He's already
all
an
this
arrow
time,
at the end of its
I have
flight.
sealed the ice
What's there
dragon's
to be
soul
afraid
in my
of?
sea of
The
consciousness.
dragon god sword
I
said
originally
angrily.
thought that I would
Everyone
never
lowered
unlock
their
the
heads,
seal in my life,
not daring to make
but I
a
didn't
sound.
expect to meet
Long
you.
Zun took a deep
The
breath
Prince
and
of
said,
Dragons opened his
Lord
mouth,
Divine Weapon is
and his
right.
tone was not
Qin
as gentle
Feiyong
as
has already
before,
fainted, but carried
and
a
the slaughter
bone-piercing
zone no
chill.
longer exists.
So that's how it is.
With the strength of us
the
dragons,
madman muttered,
we can definitely
Qin Feiyong
fight them.
also nodded in realization.
Yes, we can't
When he
rely
heard the
on
Prince
Lord
of
Divine
Dragons
Weapon for
mention the
everything.
other him.
We
He
have
was
to
still
end
a
this
little
battle
confused,
ourselves.
But
The
it turned
10
out that he
ancestral
was
dragons
referring
also
to the other
Lord.
ice dragon's soul. However,
Chapter
the
29
Prince of
19.
Dragons actually
However,
wanted to seal
their
the
words
ice
didn't
dragon's
motivate
soul.
them.
Then
Everyone
how brutal
looked
was
very
this ice
depressed,
dragon's soul?
especially the millions
Next,
of
the ice
humans who
dragon's
had
soul
sided
would
with the
control
dragon's
this.
body.
They
You
couldn't
have
help
to be
but regret
prepared.
it.
The
If
Prince
they
of
had known that
Dragons
Qin
looked at the
Feiyong
madman
was so
and said
strong,
a sentence.
who would
would have pledged their loyalty to the dragons. The madman resources were only one of the reasons why they had sided with the dragons. Vigilant. The main reason was to seek protection. At this moment, the battle between the dragons suddenly opened and the Dragon Slayer Palace, and a cold light and the dragon race would start sooner or later. In their opinion,
The Prince of Dragons no longer
and the Dragon
had any
Slayer
emotions
Palace
in his
had
eyes,
no hope of winning,
leaving only
the
indifference.
dragons had ruled the ancient
Sure
world
enough,
for so many
this
years,
prince still has to
and
make
they were
a move.
deeply rooted.
The Prince of
How
Dragons
could a mere
opened
Dragon
his
Slayer
mouth,
Palace
his
and
cold
Qin
tone
Fei
revealing
be
a
able
bit
to
of
shake them?
malevolence.
Instead
So
of
what if you
taking
come
risks
out?
with these people,
I'll still kill you.
It was better to
The
side
madman
with the
sneered.
dragons as
The
soon as
god-slaying
possible.
sword let out
This
a
way,
sonorous sword
when
cry,
the Dragon Slayer
carrying
Palace
a sharp
and Qin
edge that
Fei
could
died,
destroy heaven and
they would
earth as it
definitely be
crazily
put in an
attacked.
important position
A
by
mere
the
ant
dragons
dares to challenge this
but they
prince?
never expected
The Prince
that
of
Qin
Dragon's
Fei
face
would show
was full of
such terrifying
disdain as he
strength
raised his
and
hand,
defeat the sovereign
with the
weapon.
appearance of the law
Moreover,
of light. When
the
they
sword
saw
of
Qin
judgment
Fei
condensed
fighting
and
against the
became
sovereign
thick,
divine
following
weapon for the
closely,
ancient world,
the Prince of
for the
Dragons
world,
grabbed the
and
sword
for
of
all living
judgment
beings, they
and
felt
faced the
ashamed.
god-slaying sword.
So now they were a little
Clang.
shaken.
The two
Compared
profound
to the
divine
benevolent
abilities
Qin
collided
Fei,
once again.
they were too
The
selfish.
sword of judgment shattered
Long
once
Zun
again.
glanced at all the
The Prince
dragons
of Dragons
and humans,
spat out a
and
mouthful
a monstrous
of blood as
murderous
his body
intent
retreated.
suddenly erupted.
But he didn't
All
panic
the
at
dragons
all.
and humans
He looked at the
couldn't help but
madman
tremble
expressionlessly
and look
said,
up at Long Zun.
"Indeed, quite
The
strong.
battle with the Dragon
Do I need
Slayer
you to say
Palace
that?
hasn't even
Who
started.
doesn't know that I'm
and
very
all of
strong?
you are so lifeless."
The madman
What
snorted
is this?
coldly.
Is
Using
that
the
all you
support
have?
technique,
Can you be
he
scared out of your
closed
wits?
in on the Prince
Long
of
Zun
Dragons
was furious
and attacked again.
compared to Qin Fei Yang's subordinates and the Dragon Slayer Palace. Her people were simply a bunch
Chapter
of mobs.
29-27.
Facing Long Zun's
Then do you know
anger,
how strong
no
this
one
prince
dared to
is?
say a word.
Ice Dragon Domain.
I'll say it first.
Prince Long's
When the battle
eyes
turned
starts,
cold as a
whoever
monstrous
dares to
dragon's
desert
aura
will be
erupted.
killed without mercy.
Immediately after,
Long Zun shouted,
his cultivation
murderous
soared crazily,
intent filled the sky
in just
and
an
enveloped
instant,
the entire
he stepped
place.
into the great
All the
success
dragons and
undead
humans
realm,
couldn't help
and
but
it didn't
tremble,
stop,
and their
it was
faces
still
were full
soaring.
of fear.
Boom.
The
Useless
next
things.
moment,
Long
Prince Long
Zun
snorted
snorted coldly
coldly
and
and
looked
looked
up at the
perfection
sky.
undead
The
realm.
sovereign divine
What the
weapon
hell?
had been shattered.
Madman was shocked.
And the barrier protecting
actually
the sacred
raised his
mountain
cultivation
had also
to the perfection
dissipated.
undead realm.
Now, the dragons
One must
had no
know,
choice but
with
to
the
face
support
the
of the
enemy
blood
head-on.
demon technique.
Boom.
His
Time
cultivation
passed quietly.
was only at the
A
great
terrifying
success
baleful
undead
aura
realm.
surged out.
At the same time,
From afar,
Qin
Long
Fei
Zun
and
and
the
the
others
others
were
various
also
ancestor
shocked.
dragons
Ice
could see a
Dragon
figure
Domain?
walking over
Why
step
didn't
by
Prince
step.
Long activate
This
this
figure
kind of
was
divine
madman.
art before?
At this
But
moment,
Prince Long
the
didn't
madman's
explain.
body was
With the
surrounded by
appearance of the
blood-red
law of
flames.
light, the
And
sword
the
of
aura of
judgment
evil
appeared
power
again
enveloped
and
the
slashed.
surroundings.
With a loud
Step by
crack,
step,
the god
he walked
killing
towards
sword
the
in
sacred
madman's
mountain.
hand shattered
His
on
long
the
hair
spot.
danced wildly
Then,
in the wind.
the sword of
His
judgment
entire
carried a
person was like a
monstrous
demon
aura
king,
as it
causing
charged towards
people to
madman like
involuntarily
lightning.
feel fear.
Madman's heart tightened as he
Lunatic.
hurriedly retreated.
The Prince
But
of
he
the
was
Dragons
still
looked at
swept
the
by
madman,
the sword light.
his eyes
On his
burning with
chest,
fighting spirit.
a wide bloody
Black
mark suddenly
dragon
appeared
ancestor
as blood
dragon
gushed
glared
out.
at madman.
You're not
And
the
then
only
at
one
dragon
who can
sovereign.
create a divine art
Lord
that
Dragon
can
and
increase
Sovereign,
one's
the barrier
realm.
is gone.
The dragon
If the
prince
war
said
starts,
coldly,
I'm afraid
then
our
like a
people
demon
will.
god,
I know.
he walked toward the
Apart from
madman
those in the
step by step
imperishable
with the
realm,
judgment sword in
send
his hand.
everyone else to the
This
divine
is
spatial
impossible.
item. Madman
Long
shook
Zun
his
said
head
in a low voice.
Prince Long said
Yes.
expressionlessly,
Ancestral
Are you
dragon
very
black
puzzled
dragon
as to why
immediately
Sky
turned
Dragon
around
didn't
and took
activate
action.
the Ice Dragon
Soon,
domain before?
The sacred
The
mountain
Sky Dragon
became
he was
extremely
referring
empty,
to was naturally
leaving
the Sky
only a few
Dragon
tens
soul.
of thousands of
That's
people.
right.
But this
Madman
number was
nodded,
shocking enough.
since he had such
because
a powerful
these tens
divine
of thousands
art.
of people
Sky
were all
Dragon
in the
should have
imperishable
activated it
realm.
before.
Among them,
Because this
there were
prince
more
is
than
different
1,000
from him.
human supreme
Although
experts.
we are symbiotic,
Although many
our
human
divine
supreme
souls are
experts were
independent.
sacrificed last
He is
time.
him and I am me.
Divine Dragon
Simply
Island
put,
still had a
I can't
500-year
use the
time
divine
array
art he
after all.
created.
After all
Similarly,
these years,
he can't use
among
the divine
millions
art
of
I
people who
created.
submitted to the
Prince Long
dragons
said,
there were
There's such
also
a thing.
some who had reached
Madman
the peak
frowned.
Nine-Heavens realm,
Qin Fei Yang's
and
face was
successfully
also
stepped
full of
into the
astonishment.
half-step imperishable
This situation
realm.
was the
Of course,
opposite of the inner
there
demons.
were even more dragons.
Thinking back to when
After
the inner
all,
demons were
the
still
dragons
around,
had always been
all of his
recuperating
methods
on
could
Divine
be
Dragon
used by
Island.
the inner demons.
The number of
This
Nine
included
Heavens
the
realm
six-word
divine dragons
formula.
was already
But
countless.
now,
The
now
heavenly
with this
dragon
500-year
soul and
time
the ice
array,
dragon soul
there were naturally
two
many
completely
divine dragons
independent entities
who stepped into the
completely
imperishable
unrelated
realm.
to each other.
More than 10,000
Something's
supreme
wrong.
experts.
Since
to be
you are
honest,
unrelated to
this
the
kind
Sky
of lineup
Dragon
could be called
why
shocking.
are you able to use
the
the law of
reaction of the dragons wasn't just
Madman
for
raised
show.
his eyebrows.
Accept my wrath.
Haha.
Boom.
The ice dragon's soul laughed out loud.
And then so quickly.
What are you laughing at?
Madman rushed over
Madman
murderously.
said in a deep voice.
Without saying
This
anything,
prince is laughing
he directly
at your
opened the
stupidity.
blood demon
The
domain.
ice dragon's soul
a
shook
huge
its head and
blood-colored
said,
barrier
"Do
quickly
you still need
enveloped
to
the
ask?"
sacred mountain.
Of course.
Not good.
It's because I've
The
also
ancestral
comprehended the
dragon's
laws of
expressions
light.
changed. The dragons already knew how powerful
As he
the blood
spoke,
demon
he had
domain
already
was.
walked in front of
Once
the
enveloped
madman
by the
and
blood demon
slashed his
domain,
sword at the madman.
it was equivalent to
Madman
falling
hurriedly
into a
retreated
desperate
and said in
situation.
shock,
God's
"You've
domain.
actually comprehended
At
the
this
law of
moment,
light?"
A faint
What's
laugh
there to
sounded.
be surprised
The
about?
prince of the
Even
dragons
the sky
gently
dragon
waved
can
his arm,
comprehend it,
and a
let
sacred
alone
barrier
this prince.
rushed into the sky.
The ice dragon's
Before
soul
Madman's
was full
blood
of
demon
disdain.
domain landed,
The sword of judgment
it disappeared
swept
across
into
the
thin
sky,
air. God's
forcing
domain.
the madman
God
to
techniques
retreat,
were ineffective.
and his injuries to worsen.
Seeing this,
He really
the
didn't
ancestral
expect the dragon's
all
soul
let out a breath
to be
of
hiding
relief.
such a terrifying
As long
ice
as there was a
dragon's
god's
soul.
domain.
What's wrong?
No matter how strong
That's
the
it.
god technique
The
was,
disdain on the
it
ice
was
dragon's
useless.
soul's face
At the
became
same time,
even thicker.
Madman
As his
looked at the
voice
blood
fell,
demon domain
the sword of
disappearing,
judgment in his
and
hand
raised his eyebrows
automatically
slightly.
dissipated. He stopped and stood in
The
the
madman
sky,
was surprised,
looking down at the prince
What did
of the
this mean?
dragons.
In
In
terms
terms
of
of the
potential
dragon's
and
faintly
comprehension,
smiled and stepped
the
forward.
sky dragon kid
stepping
can't
into the
compare
sky
to me.
step by step.
Now, I'll let you
standing
see what
in
a
the
true
air with
monster
madman.
is.
You're finally
Esoteric
willing to make a
superpower,
move.
holy sword of
Madman
light.
said.
The
At
ice
this
dragon's
point, do
soul
I still
waved
have a
his hand,
choice?
and the law
prince
of light
of the dragon
appeared.
shrugged.
With a clang,
His white robe
a
was as
giant
white
sword
as snow,
appeared,
and he
and
looked
his
very
sacred aura
calm.
instantly
You do
shrouded
have
the
some
surroundings.
awareness. Holy sword of light.
Madman gave a chilling
Seeing this
smile.
scene,
Of
not
course
only
I have,
Madman, but I
but
don't
even
know if you
Qin
have
Fei
this
Yang and the
awareness.
others.
As
As
soon
well
as the
as the
prince
group
of the
of
dragon
people
from
from
the
the
dragon
dragon
race,
speaking,
we're all
his eyes
bewildered.
suddenly became sharp.
You don't even know
like
about
blades
the
of
holy
blades.
sword of light?
Madman
You guys are
stared
really
at the prince
ridiculous.
of the dragons and
The
suddenly
ice
laughed.
dragon's soul scanned
Then
the
don't
crowd
waste
and said
words.
coldly,
Clang.
The holy
As
sword
he
of
waved
light
his
is
hand,
the third
a
esoteric
dazzling golden
superpower of the
divine
law
light
of light.
appeared,
And a
What?
heavenly halberd
You've already
appeared.
comprehended
Heaven-defying
the third
divine
esoteric
artifact.
superpower.
Using
The
a
madman
heaven-defying
exclaimed,
divine artifact
"That's right.
from the start.
The ice dragon's
It
soul
could be
nodded.
seen how much importance
Unbelievable.
the prince of the
How
dragons
did he do
was
it?
placed on the madman.
The third esoteric
the prince of the
superpower
dragons looked at the
requires
golden
one to
halberd
comprehend
and
the law
raised
of
his
light.
arm to the
A
greater
saint god
success
aura
stage of the
exploded.
fourth stage.
It was worth mentioning
Terrifying,
that the
truly
prince of the
terrifying.
dragon's cultivation
It wasn't just
had been
madman.
suppressed to
Even
the
Yi
half-step
Zhong
undead
and
realm.
the other powerful
The next
cultivators
moment,
from the
a
older
milky white
generation
sword appeared,
felt waves
and
of
its
sharpness
sharpness
swept
swept
across the world.
This level of
Heaven-defying
comprehension
divine
ability
technique
could simply be
God
said to
slaying
be
sword.
unprecedented in
Kill.
the past and
Almost at the
unparalleled
same
in the
time,
future.
the two
Lord
roared and
Longzuan,
charged
is
at
this
each other.
true?
Clang.
The dragon's
As
group
the
were
two
also in
heaven-defying
disbelief,
godly weapons
especially
clashed with
the
one
ancestral
another.
dragons.
A destructive
They had
aura burst
cultivated
out for
from them.
countless years.
Retreat.
And hadn't even
The dragon
comprehended
sovereign
the beginner
shouted.
level of the
The
law
tens
of
of
light.
thousands of
Let
supreme
alone
beings
the third
who had gathered at the
esoteric
Saint
superpower.
Mountain immediately
Therefore, they
left
found
the
it
mountain
hard to accept
and retreated into
the
the
Longzuan
distance.
was silent.
Boom.
Her face was
Crack.
covered by
The
mist
Saint
and her
Mountain was
expression
turned to
couldn't be
dust
seen.
under the impact
However,
of this
from
aura.
her clenched
Whoosh.
fists and trembling
At the
body,
same time,
it wasn't
one
hard to
figure
guess
after
that she was
another
very
appeared
excited.
behind the madman.
Lord Longzuan,
Leading them were
the
Qin
ancestral
Batian,
dragons
Lu
looked at the
Xingyang,
Longzuan
Yi Zhong,
suspiciously.
sovereign beast and cloud
the
sovereign.
Longzuan seemed
Next
to have
was the
recovered
ice emperor
and
and the
looked
rain
at the
emperor.
ancestral dragons
Behind
in
them were
confusion.
Xia Yuan,
So we
and
didn't
the
hear
other
their
108
before.
generals.
The
They were
ancestral
the only
dragons
ones
who
who
came
came
out
out
now.
now.
However, they
this
didn't dare
force
to
couldn't
show
be
their
underestimated.
dissatisfaction. 5 great circle indestructible supreme experts. 2 major perfection immortal realm experts. 108 minor perfection immortal realm experts. Putting aside the dragon sovereign, the dragons couldn't compare to the Dragon Slayer Palace in terms of quality. Retreat. Yi Zhong also ordered. The group immediately retreated, leaving the battlefield to the madman and the prince of the dragons. Clang. Boom. The fire
god
dragon
slaying
ancestral
art
dragon
and the sky
asked.
halberd collided in
Lord,
the void.
Is it true
Sparks
that His
flew
Highness
everywhere,
has comprehended
and
the third
destructive
esoteric
waves spread in all
superpower?
directions?
Didn't you guys
Although
see
it
it with
couldn't
your own
compare
eyes?
to the battle
Do you
between
still need
Qin
to
Fei
ask?
Yang
And the
the
sovereign
Longzuan
divine
glared
weapon.
at the 10 of them.
It was enough
Although
to
we
shock
saw
the
it with
world.
our own eyes. Not
It's
good.
still too shocking.
Yi Zhong and the others
The black
have already
dragon
stepped
ancestral
into the
dragon
perfection
said,
immortal realm.
That's true.
The blood
The
dragon
Longzuan
ancestor
nodded.
dragon
To
looked at the
comprehend the
madman
third
and
esoteric
the prince of the
superpower
dragon
at such a young age.
His eyes fell on
Who
Yi
could
Zhong
compare
and the
with
others,
such an achievement?
and his pupils
What
shrank.
Qin Fei Yang?
These
What
damn
madman?
The
They
black
weren't
dragon
even fit to
ancestor
carry her
dragon
son's
snorted.
shoes. Do you
Who?
only know how to
Taking
curse?
a deep breath.
What did I say
The
back
Longzuan
then?
looked up at the
I told
dragon
you to
prince
work
and
hard
smiled.
and break through
Actually,
to the perfection
this
immortal
lord
realm.
didn't know that he had
But what
already
happened in the
comprehended
end?
the third esoteric superpower.
Even Qin Batian
Even
and
you didn't
Lu
know?
Xingyang,
This
the
ice
2
dragon's
rising
soul
stars,
is hidden too deeply.
have stepped into the
The blood
perfection
dragon
immortal
ancestral
realm.
dragon
But
frowned.
you guys are still in the
What
same
ice dragon
place.
soul?
This
What's
is
the
the result
result
of your
soul?
hard work.
They are all this
You guys
lord's
are worse
children.
than trash.
This lord
The dragon
doesn't want to
sovereign
hear such
said
a name
angrily.
again. Understand?
Looking at these
the
ancestor
Longzuan
dragons,
shouted.
he was angry.
Yes,
He was an ancestor
the blood dragon
dragon,
ancestral
but why was
dragon
he so
hurriedly
much
bowed.
worse than Qin
The
Batian
ancestral
and the
dragons
others?
all knew
At the
about
same
the
time,
existence of the
she
ice
couldn't
dragon
help but
soul.
worry.
And the
Although
sky
only
dragon
Yi
soul,
Zhong and the others
because
had
the
appeared,
dragon's prince
she
already
could
had 2
imagine that there
souls
must
when he
be a
was
large
large
born.
number of
In
supreme
other words,
experts
this was
in the
innate.
Black Tortoise
However,
realm.
because
The
the
most
most
important
important
thing
thing
was
to conceal this
there
matter,
were also
many
heaven-defying
people,
divine
including
weapons like
most
the
dragons,
sunset divine
didn't know
now that hadn't appeared.
Battlefield.
This
Looking
power
at
was
the
enough
holy
to
light
crush the
sword
dragons.
floating in front of the ice
dragon's
dragon's
situation
soul.
was worrying.
Madman finally
Crack.
calmed down the
Suddenly,
shock in his heart.
An earth-shattering
Now you
sound
understand
rang out
why
on the
this prince
battlefield.
sealed himself?
Long Zun
It's because
hurriedly
this
looked
prince
over
is too strong.
and saw the madman
The ice dragon
and the
soul
prince of the
laughed
dragons
coldly,
flying out.
who, blood
Madman
gushing
let out
out
a
of their
long
mouths.
breath and said,
And the
"You're
gods'
too
slaying
arrogant."
sword and the sky
Ha ha.
halberd in their hands
As he
have been
said, this
shattered.
prince has the
It's actually a
qualifications to
draw.
be arrogant.
Long Zun
The
was
ice
extremely
dragon soul
shocked.
laughed.
He didn't
And the
expect
holy
that
light
even the
sword suddenly
madman's
let out a
strength
sword
was so
cry
strong.
that shook the sky.
Not bad.
And charged
The
towards
madman
Madman.
stabilized his
No,
body.
you don't.
And looked at
Madman
the prince
shook
of the
his
dragons
head,
with a grin.
and an obscure
You're
aura
not bad
spread
either.
out from his body.
The prince of the dragons
coming.
said. Qin
But I
Baishan's
advise
eyes
you,
trembled.
don't suppress your
What's
cultivation
coming?
at the end.
Qin Feiyang was
Bring out
surprised.
your full strength, blood
Madman's
demon
battle
domain.
soul. The
Qin
madman
Batian
activated
said
the
word
blood
by
demon
word.
domain again.
Battle soul
and enveloped the
Qin
prince
Feiyang
of the
was
dragons.
taken aback.
A terrifying
hurriedly
murderous
looked at
aura
Madman.
instantly
His
engulfed
eyes
the
filled
world.
with anticipation.
The prince of the dragons
He really wanted to
cultivation
know how
suddenly
heaven
began to
defying
plummet.
Madman's battle soul
When you
was.
have the qualifications,
At this moment,
I will naturally
the
bring
holy
out my
light
full
sword had
strength.
already arrived in
Heavenly
front of
dragon
Madman.
domain. And the
The prince
terrifying
of the
edge tore
dragons
through
waved his
Madman's
hand,
skin, and a milky
causing
white
blood to
barrier
gush out.
appeared, enveloping
Blood-eye.
all directions.
It was also at this
The
moment
madman's cultivation
madman
also
roared as
began
his
to
forehead
plummet,
split open,
because the blood
revealing a
demon
blood red
domain
eye.
and the heavenly
this?
dragon domain
The
had the
ice
same
dragon
ability.
soul looked
Both of their
suspiciously at the blood eye.
cultivations fell to the
For
nine
some
heavens
reason,
realm. When he looked at the blood eye,
qualifications,
he actually
then I'll
felt
let you
a
see
sense
if I
of
have the
panic in his heart.
qualifications.
At the
The
same
madman
time,
took a step
Madman
forward,
took a step
and the
forward,
power in his
and
body
dodged the
suddenly
attack of the
surged
holy
out like
light
a
sword
torrent as he punched
He appeared
out.
on the other
The
side
prince
and
of the
shouted,
dragons didn't
innate
retreat at
ability,
all,
and also
petrification.
punched out. Boom! The two fists
As
collided
Madman's
together,
voice fell,
and a
a
monstrous
strange
chi wave
force
rolled
suddenly
out.
emerged from
Pooh.
the blood eye
The
and
next
shrouded
moment,
the ice
the
dragon's
prince
soul.
of the dragons
The next
spat out a
moment,
mouthful of
a
blood,
shocking scene
and
appeared.
flew out like
A layer
meteor.
of stone-like
Even the
scales
skin on his
quickly
arm
appeared
was
on the body
lacerated
of the
and
ice
almost
dragon's
shattered.
soul.
The skin
What?
on his face
His
was the
Highness
most
is actually not a
eye-catching.
match.
The stone-like
The
scales
dragon's
quickly
sovereign
spread across
and
his
the others
entire
standing
face.
in the distance
Even
were
the
all
eyes
shocked.
of the ice dragon's soul
Not
were
good.
petrified. His physical
This
body
is-
has already reached
Seeing
the
this,
sovereign level.
Long Zun and
Wang
the others
Cheng couldn't help
exclaimed,
but turn pale
"What?
with fright.
Sovereign level?
No matter who
The
it
10
is,
ancestral
in front of
dragons'
Madman's
expressions
face,
changed.
They can't
The black
escape the
dragon
fate of being
ancestral
petrified.
dragon said.
Qin
That's
Batian
impossible.
said. This
I
is
know
his
his
innate
strength.
ability. Qin Feiyang murmured. His physical body
That's right.
hasn't reached this
The
level
ability
yet.
to petrify
What
is
you
not
know is
something
only
that
when he
doesn't
was in the
exist
Nether
in this
King's
world.
world. And the
It may
current
not
him
give
is
people a
already
very
different
scary
from
feeling.
before. But
Do you
that's
still
just
remember
ordinary
the scene
petrifying
when he went
petrification.
through the tribulation
For example,
last time?
some creatures
He is
have
the
the
same
ability
as
to
Qin
petrify,
Feiyang.
using
You need
the
to look at their
tribulation
eyes
to
to
be
temper his
petrified.
physical body.
But Madman
Wang
is different.
Cheng said in a deep
It's
voice.
not you looking at him. It's him looking at you.
Qin
Chapter
Batian
2920. What does
With
this
Wang
mean?
Cheng's reminder,
Qin Feiyang frowned.
everyone remembered.
Qin Batian
At that
said,
time,
it means that as
madman
long
was
as his
indeed
blood eye
using the
looks at
tribulation
someone,
to
they
temper
will
his
be
body.
petrified. Young people
Qin
nowadays
Feiyang's
are
eyes
really
trembled
scarier
when
than
he
the
heard
last.
this.
These
Wang
were
Cheng
indeed two
shook his
different
head.
concepts.
Yes,
For the
we old
former,
fellows have
you
to
will only
admit
be
that we're
petrified
old.
if you look
An
at
old
his
woman
eyes.
nodded.
For this
How is
type,
it?
there are ways
Do I
to
have the
avoid it.
qualifications
You can
to
either
make you
not
use
look
your
at his
full
eyes
strength
or directly
The
close
madman
your
stood
eyes.
proudly in the
But
air
Madman's innate
and looked
ability
at
is
the Prince
not up to you,
Dragons who was flying
because
back.
the initiative
The
is in
Prince
Madman's
Dragons
hands.
took a step forward
Whoever
and
he wants to
forcefully
petrify,
stabilized his body.
he will look at that
He looked up
person.
at the madman
Even
and
if you
shook
close
his
your
head.
eyes, it's
No.
useless.
As
Although
he
it's the
spoke,
same
a surge of
petrification
heavenly
ability,
dragon power
the degree
appeared,
of terror
and
his
his
torn
torn
arm
arm
healed at a
This
speed
is indeed
visible
a
to the naked
heaven-defying
eye.
battle soul.
This recovery
Moreover,
ability, once
the
petrified
madman's
by the
people
blood
shrank
eye,
and he laughed.
except for Madman
Still not.
himself, then come
No one
again.
can break the
petrification
petrification
state.
The madman took
The
another
most
step
important
forward,
point, and his
after
aura
being
roared in all
petrified,
directions
you
as
will
he
lose
punched at the
consciousness
prince
like a
dragon.
real stone statue.
But with the previous
If the
lesson,
stone statue
the
is
Prince
shattered,
Dragons didn't
you will
choose to
completely
fight
lose
head
your
on.
life.
Schwa.
Qin Batian
He took a
said
mysterious
again.
step
When
and
Qin
dodged the
Feiyang
madman's
heard this,
punch. He couldn't help but
instantly
be
appearing
shocked.
behind the madman.
Except for Madman
If you
himself,
think that my
no
battle
one can
awareness
break
is
the
inferior to
petrification.
Qin Feiyang's,
Then if one is
then you
petrified,
are gravely
wouldn't it be a
mistaken.
dead end? The madman seemed to be able to predict the future as he sent out a palm strike. Puff. Chapter
The Prince
2928.
spat out another
Qin
mouthful
Feiyang
of
couldn't
blood
help but think
and
of
was
Soul
sent flying
Sealing Valley.
again.
His
Soul
reaction
Sealing
is too
Valley
fast.
used to
The
have the
dragons
power
were
to
shocked.
petrify people.
Putting aside the
As long
slaughter
as one
domain,
entered Soul
he is a
Sealing
youngster
Valley,
who isn't
they would be
inferior to Qin
petrified.
Feiyang.
They would lose their
no wonder Qin
consciousness
Feiyang
and
cares
turn
so
into
much
a
about
stone stone statue.
Wang Chong
But
shook
Soul
his
Ceiling
head.
Valley was
If
different.
Qin Feiyong cares
After
about
being
him,
petrified
then
in
he will
Soul
erase
Ceiling
him.
Valley.
Long
As
Zoom
long as
coldly
one
smiled
exits
and
the
looked at
valley,
the Prince
the
Dragons,
petrification state
stop
would
playing around
automatically
and kill
be
him for
removed.
me.
But
the
here,
Prince Dragon
if Madman
stabilized
wasn't
his body
willing to help
and
remove
looked
the
up at Long
petrification
Zoom
state,
the Madman
then the
also
other
glanced
party
at
would
Long
be
Zoom
petrified forever.
and then looked at the Prince
Terrifying,
Dragons.
truly terrifying.
Did you hear that?
After being
That old
petrified
witch
and
has
losing
spoken.
consciousness,
Hurry up and use
no
your
matter
full
how
strength.
strong your cultivation
This is my battle, not
or
hers.
how terrifying your means
However,
are.
she
You
is my
wouldn't be
mother
able
after
to
all.
resist. You should be more polite to
being
her.
a fish on the
words
chopping
old
board.
witch are not
While
appropriate.
the conversation was going
The Prince
on,
of Dragons shook
Dragon's
his head.
body was almost
Not
completely
suitable.
petrified.
Have you forgotten
Suddenly,
how she treated
the
Yi
holy
Shuai
radiant sword
grandfather
dissipated in the void.
She wouldn't even
The
let an old
dissipation
woman
of the holy
and a little
radiant
girl
sword
go.
meant that the
For someone as
consciousness
vicious
of the
as
ice
her,
dragon's soul
calling her an
was
old
also
witch is already
dissipating.
very polite.
When the consciousness
Madman
of the ice
sneered.
dragon's soul
The Prince of the
completely
Dragons
dissipated,
took a deep look
even
at
a
the
god
madman and
wouldn't be
smiled.
able to save him.
All right,
Not only
since
the
that's
ice
the
dragon's
case,
soul,
I won't be polite.
even the sky dragon's
I was just
soul
waiting
in his
for
sea
you
of
to be
consciousness
impolite.
felt the aura of
Madman
death.
laughed loudly.
What did I say to
Boom.
you?
The
Don't
Prince of the
underestimate
Dragons
him.
shuddered as
You
a
just didn't
terrifying
believe
aura
me.
burst out
Look
from
at what
him.
happened now.
The Blood Devil
The
domain
sky
was
dragon's soul
immediately
sighed.
shattered.
How
And
would
his
I know that he
cultivation
has
had
such
shockingly
talent?
reached the
The
small
ice dragon's
success
soul
of the
raged.
imperishable realm.
Then quickly open
You
your
asked
god's
for it.
domain. The
And
Prince
see
of
if
the
you can break
Dragons
the
spoke,
petrification
killing
state.
intent appearing
The
in
sky
his
dragon's
eyes for
soul
the first
said.
time. Although they were independent souls with independent
The Prince
thoughts,
of the Dragons
their
smiled.
battle souls were
Looks
of the
like
same
Qin
body.
Feiyang didn't
In other
neglect
words,
this father.
They could
You're
share their
indeed an
battle
anomaly
souls,
among the dragons.
unheard of. And
With
an
a
opponent
thought,
worthy of
the
respect.
ice dragon's soul
As
opened
soon as
its
the
god's
madman
domain.
finished speaking,
But the
the
petrification
first 3
state
moves
showed
of
no
the blood
signs of
demon art
dissipating.
appeared out of nowhere.
This is really bad.
Thank you for your
The sky
praise.
dragon's soul's
The Prince
heart
of the
sank.
Dragons also
Still
took a
talking
step
nonsense.
forward.
As
Quickly
the
think
power
of
of
a
the
way.
divine dragon
The ice
appeared,
dragon's soul
a
urged.
giant sword,
On the
a
other
bright
side,
moon, and
the
99
dragons were
heavenly
also burning
dragons
with
appeared.
anxiety. This was his
No,
supreme killing
I have to
technique.
save him.
Heavenly dragon
Long
technique.
Zun gritted his teeth,
Cutting moon
and
divine
rushed to the
moon.
battlefield.
Heavenly dragon
You still
subduing
dare to
demons.
come?
Madman sensed
The two
Long Zun's
techniques
aura,
carried a
and his
monstrous
eyes
aura
flashed a
as
cold
they blasted
smile.
towards each
His
other.
blood eyes directly locked onto Long Zun. Chapter
this moment,
29:21. Long Zun's body
battle was
stiffened and
soul-stirring.
stopped in the void.
If one wasn't
his
careful,
body
they
also
would fall.
quickly began to
Therefore,
petrify. The two of them
how
were
is this
fully
possible?
focused and didn't
Long
dare
Zun's
to be
expression
distracted.
changed drastically.
Gradually, even
They
she was
both entered a
petrified.
state of
The
selflessness,
expressions of the
and only
ancestral
had each
dragons
other in their
changed
eyes.
when they saw that.
All kinds of divine
That's the
arts
most
appeared at
terrifying
their
part.
fingertips.
Madman's innate
Constantly
divine
colliding
ability
together
is able to
and
petrify
destroying all
anyone
directions.
within the same realm.
After a few breaths
Qin
of time,
Batian said, the two of
Qin
them had
Feiyang
already
exclaimed,
exchanged tens
"Does
of
that mean
thousands
he
of
can
blows.
also petrify
There
Long
were many
Zun?
wounds on their
Yes.
bodies, blood flowing
It's just
out.
that the process will
God
be
vanquishing
slower.
sword. Qin
Heaven
Batian
destroying
nodded.
halberd.
Suddenly, the two of them roared
If
at the
even
same
a great
time
perfection
and activated their heaven-defying divine
arts.
into stone. Immediately,
Then wouldn't his
the
innate
god
ability be
vanquishing
unbreakable?
sword and the halberd
Qin
carried
Feiyang
a
was stunned.
world-destroying sharpness
It's not to the
as they
extent
struck
that there's
each
no
other.
solution.
Boom. For
A loud
example,
sound
a
suddenly
powerful
resounded
external
through the
force can
clouds.
forcefully
The
interrupt two of them it. retreated
Given
one after
Madman's
another,
cultivation,
blood gushing
this
out of their
external
mouths.
force has to be
Madman
at the sovereign
stabilized
realm
his
in order
body,
to break it.
wiped the blood from
Qin
the corner
Batian
of his
said,
mouth, and
"Ruler
said
realm,
angrily, Qin Feiyang's
why didn't
eyes
you
trembled.
open your god's domain?
This was simply
Prince
unsolvable.
Dragon said,
After all,
don't you have other
there were
methods
no
hidden?
rulers in the ancient
Haha.
realm at all.
It seems that I
What
have
about
to use
that
my
heaven-defying
true strength.
divine artifact?
Madman laughed wildly.
Yi Zhong suddenly asked,
raising his head and
That's
pointing
right.
in the air.
After the
A
seal on the
blood-red
heaven-defying
barrier
divine artifact
instantly
is unlocked
appearing out
and
of
fully
nowhere
awakened,
and enveloping
its
Prince
power
Dragons.
is almost at the half-step
This is
sovereign realm.
Prince Dragon
That
suddenly felt a
heaven-defying
great
divine
sense of
artifact
danger.
should be able to
Freeze.
forcefully
That's
interrupt
right.
it. This was
Right?
the fifth style
Qin
of the
Feiyang
blood
said,
demon blood prison.
That's true.
As the blood
the
prison
dragons
fell,
have heaven-defying
Madman
divine
shouted and
artifacts
Prince
now.
Dragons was
The sacred
immediately
dragon
frozen
sword
in the air,
and the blood demon
That's right.
tower have both
that was
been
to
damaged.
freeze in the air.
Needless
not
to
to
say,
imprison. The sovereign
imprison
divine
and freeze
artifact
were two
is
different
almost shattered.
concepts.
It can't
How
help
could this
even
be?
if it wants to.
Prince
Qin
Dragons was
Batian shook
extremely
his head.
shocked.
There
Qin
was
Feiyang
actually
nodded
such a
and said,
terrifying divine
"Since
art in this
heaven-defying
world,
divine artifacts
obliterate
can do it."
The next
Then the
moment,
heaven-defying
the
divine
madman
arts
roared
and
again,
the power of
and
laws
a
should be
terrifying
able to
force
do it
immediately
too.
rushed toward the
Heaven-defying
dragon
divine
prince.
arts.
At this
The
moment,
power of laws.
the dragon
Qin
prince's
Batian was
divine
stunned.
soul sensed a fatal
Yes.
threat.
A
Qin Feiyang
divine art
nodded.
that targets the
Qin
divine
Batian
soul.
shook his head and said,
Prince Dragons was
"Looks
shocked
like you
and
haven't
no
fully
longer dared to
understood
hold
the
back,
heaven-defying
shouting,
divine arts
"Heavenly
and the
dragon
power
secret
of
art.
laws. Moon sealing.
What do you mean?
A sacred
Qin
aura
Feiyang was
erupted,
stunned.
sealing the
Heaven-defying
area around
divine
him.
arts.
Boom. The power of
When the
laws.
power of the blood
and the
prison
heaven-defying
blasted towards
divine
the
artifact
sacred aura
can't be understood
was
with
immediately
one
blocked
concept.
outside.
As everyone knows,
Powerful.
the heaven-defying
Madman's eyes
divine
lit up.
artifacts have
To
their
be
own
able to block consciousness
the power of
and
the
can
blood prison.
automatically awaken
It was
to their
clear
peak
that
state.
Seal Moon's move
And
was
the strength of the
specifically used to
heaven-defying
protect the
divine
artifacts
soul
is always at
same
its
here.
peak.
The
But
Prince
the
of the Dragon
heaven-defying divine
smiled.
arts
The
and the
best
power
part
of
is
laws
yet
are
to come.
different.
Don't worry.
These two don't have their own
Explode.
consciousness.
Madman roared,
and their
The
power
blood
is
prison
determined
suddenly
by the user's
exploded in the void
cultivation.
like a bomb
For
exploding.
example,
The
sweeping
mad
in all
scientist
directions,
and the Prince
the
Dragons.
destructive power
Before
of
the
the
mad
blood prison
scientist
self-detonated
activated
the blood demon
was
art.
even more
The
terrifying
Prince
than the
Dragons relied on his
self-detonation of a
initial
powerhouse
imperishable
at the
realm
same boundary.
cultivation. And the
What is he
second
doing?
profound divine
Seeing
ability of the
Madman
law of
explode
light,
the blood prison,
the sword of
Jean
judgment,
Batian
to
and the
crush
others
the mad
couldn't help but
scientist's
pale.
god-killing sword.
Although
You
they
have
had
to know
never
that the
seen
god-killing
God-killing
sword
sword
is also
before.
the second profound
Jean
divine
Feiyang,
ability of
Fire
the law
Lotus,
of slaughter.
and the others knew.
So, Back
the
then,
stronger the user's
when the madman
cultivation,
was fighting with the
stronger
giant
the
beast
power
in the
of the
divine
heaven-defying
demon
divine arts,
he had
and the power of
self-destructed
laws.
the blood prison.
Simply
At
put,
that time,
the power
although
of the
Fire Lotus
heaven-defying
and the
divine
others were in the
artifacts is
castle,
fixed. They could
no
hear
matter
the
how much
commotion
you
outside,
awakened,
and
it
naturally
only be
knew
at the
that the
half-step
self-destruction
sovereign
of the blood prison,
of course,
would bring
the
serious
sunset
side
divine
effects to
bow and the
Madman.
other heaven-defying
Regarding
divine
this point,
artifacts are
Huo
different.
Lian and the others had mentioned it when they were chatting.
And the power of
Therefore,
laws
Qin
and the
Batian
heaven-defying
and
divine
the others
arts are
also knew
unstable.
about it now.
Qin
Exploding
Batian
the blood
smiled.
prison would
Qin
make
Feiyang
Madman
heard
so
this,
weak that
and
he wouldn't
carefully
even have the
pondered for a
strength to
while
fight.
before nodding with
But
a
now,
smile.
Madman
Seems
actually
like it.
chose to
Then he looked up
self-destruct
at
the
the
Madman
Madman
and
and
said with a smile,
Wasn't this seeking his own
in
death?
that case,
Don't
senior
worry,
brother Madman
Madman
alone can
isn't a
sweep through the
muddle-headed
Dragon
person.
Clan. Since he
Otherwise,
dares to do it,
do you think
then
he dared
must
to
have
say
some
such big
confidence.
words before you
Lu
fainted?
Xingyang comforted.
The only thing he's
Rumble.
afraid of is the
sovereign
self-destruction
divine
of the
weapon
blood prison
and the sacred
destroyed
dragon
the world.
sword. Even
As
the
long
revered
as he can
dragon
get rid of these
and the
two
other
divine
ancestral
weapons,
dragons
he will
couldn't
be
help
an
but
invincible
pale.
existence.
Even they were like this.
Qin Batian smiled.
Let alone the prince of
Qin
the dragons,
Feiyang was taken
who was
aback
standing
and
opposite
recalled the scene
Madman.
when he fainted.
A fatal threat
The mad
shrouded his
scientist
heart.
looked at the
There was
heavily
no
injured
doubt
him,
that this
and
terrifying
confidently
lethality
said
was
to
enough
leave
to
the
shatter
rest to
his
him.
bones.
To be honest,
But now, when he
since the
heard
blood
this, he
prison
didn't
had
take it seriously.
self-destructed. Because
Opening
the
the
mad
God's
scientist
domain was
always
useless.
had this kind of
The so-called
unconventional
God's domain was
personality,
only useful
but he
before
didn't
the blood
expect him
prison
to really have this
self-destructed.
ability.
In other words,
blood eye
once
petrification.
the blood prison
He
self-destructed,
just didn't know if the eye of
even
heaven
the God's
could
domain
replicate
wouldn't
this
be
blood
able
eye.
to erase
If
this
it could,
destructive
Qin Feiyang
force.
wasn't afraid.
I admit
But
that
if
the
it couldn't,
current you already
frankly
has the
speaking,
qualifications
although he
to
had
make
many
me use my
heaven-defying
strength,
divine artifacts
divine
in his
moon
hands,
shield.
as the
still
prince of
couldn't
the
help but
dragon's
be
voice
wary.
fell.
A vast
Qin
aura
Feiyang
suddenly roared out.
Suddenly,
the
immediately
mad
after,
scientist's voice
in
sounded.
front of the prince of the
What's wrong?
dragons,
A
Qin
full
Feiyang
moon
looked at
appeared,
him from afar.
flickering with
The
bright
mad
divine
scientist
light.
also
The next
slowly
moment,
turned his head.
The prince
and
of the
looked at
dragons
Qin
stepped
Feiyang
on
and
the
the
divine
others.
moon.
Qin
and stood in
Feiyang's
its
face
center.
changed and hurriedly
Boom.
shouted,
The destructive
"Don't look at us.
fluctuations of the
What
blood
are you
prison
afraid of?
self-destruction
Even
rolled
if I
out.
petrify you,
But when it hit the
I can
divine
immediately
moon,
help you
it was
remove the
blocked outside.
petrification state."
Such a terrifying
The mad
explosion
scientist laughed
actually
proudly.
didn't cause any
Come on.
damage to the
Qin
prince of the
Feiyang
dragons.
pursed his lips.
This
Fine.
Madman looked
The
at the
mad
prince of the
scientist
dragons
turned his
with
head
a
again
dazed
and laughed.
expression.
Do
The
you
prince of
remember
the
what I
dragons
said to you
said,
before you
The
fainted?
divine moon shield has
I
absolute
just talked
defense.
about this with the ancestor.
Apart from heaven-defying
Qin
divine
Feiyang
weapons
nodded
and
his
divine
head.
arts,
Then you
nothing
just
can
stand
break
there
it.
obediently
Black
and
tortoise
watch how I
world.
deal with these
Yang Li
bastards.
looked at the prince
The
of the
mad
dragons in
scientist
surprise
smiled coldly
and said to
and
Wang
used
Ming
an
next to
auxiliary
him,
technique to
"This
rush in
seems
the
similar
direction
to
of
your
the dragons.
invincible shield."
He really wants to annihilate
this
the
divine
dragons
moon
in one
shield
fell
is
swoop.
stronger than the
Cloud
invincible
Supreme was
shield.
stunned.
Wang Ming
Does
shook
he
his
look like
head.
he's joking?
Yang Li's
But
pupil
this is
shrank,
also good,
and he said
it
in a deep
saves us the
voice,
trouble of making
"This
a move.
prince of the dragons
Sovereign
is indeed
Beast
not
said,
simple."
That mad
Yes,
scientist is coming.
But what surprised me the
At the
most
same
is that
time,
this little
the
lunatic
people on the
exploded
dragon
the blood
side
prison.
also discovered
Why
the
didn't
mad
there be any
scientist
side effects?
and fell into a panic.
Wang Ming frowned.
Run! Don't let his blood
When
eye
he was
see
fighting
us.
with the giant
Sovereign
beast
dragon
in the forest
shouted.
of gods
He
and
never
demons.
thought that he would
He
fall
and
in the
Yang Li
hands
were
of
both
this mad
present
scientist
and witnessed it with their
hearing
own eyes.
sovereign dragon's
At
words.
that time,
The tens
after
of
Madman's
thousands of people
exploded the
didn't
blood
dare to
prison,
hesitate.
he directly
and
became a
immediately
cripple.
turned to flee.
But now nothing happened
Escape?
to him.
The mad
This guy
scientist
is getting
snorted and
scarier
shouted,
and scarier.
"Snowflake,
Suddenly,
send me over."
a laugh rang
The
out.
snowflake
Young
floating above
master,
Qin Feiyang,
Yang Li,
and the
Wang
others
Ming,
immediately
Fire
activated
Lotus,
the law of
Huo
space.
Yi,
And
and
the
the
others
time
all
tunnel
turned
appeared
around
in front
and saw
of the
Qin
mad
Feiyang
scientist.
and the mermaid
The mad
princess
scientist
standing
took
at
a
the
step
entrance
in.
of the castle.
"Damn it,
You're awake!" The white-eyed wolf ran up. Sovereign
And
Dragon was
Qin
enraged
Feiyang nodded
and
and
immediately
asked,
activated
"How long
the law
has
of
it been?"
space.
A
And
lot has
huge
passed
space
in the
crack
black
appeared
tortoise
in
world,
front of the ancestral
but not much
dragons.
time has passed outside.
Her body hadn't been
The white-eyed
completely
wolf said,
petrified. Qin
"So it
Feiyang
didn't
nodded.
stop her from
Fire
activating
Lotus
the law
asked
of
with
space.
concern.
How
Seeing
are
the
your
space
injuries
crack
now?"
appear,
"They're
the
almost
10
healed."
ancestral dragons
Qin Feiyang
immediately
nodded.
led the dragons
After
towards
all,
the space
he had
crack.
fused with the
Chua.
fire of life,
But at the same
and
time,
his bloodline
the
power
mad
had
scientist
extremely
appeared,
strong healing
his blood eye
abilities.
flashing with a
In
demonic
addition,
light.
the mermaid
Immediately,
princess had
the
given him
tens
a
of
divine
thousands
life
of people
pill
on the
when she was
dragon's taking care of
started
him.
to petrify.
So even if he was
those
unconscious,
half-step
his
imperishable
injuries
realm
were
experts
automatically
were completely
healing.
petrified
That's
in an
good.
instant.
Everyone
Because
heaved
their
a sigh of
cultivation
relief.
was weaker.
Right
They
now,
petrified
Qin Feiyong
faster.
was everyone's backbone.
Damn it.
He couldn't fall.
Sovereign Dragon
Qin
roared.
Feiyong raised
A mere
his head
human was able
and
to
looked at
annihilate
Madman
all of her dragons.
and the Prince of Dragons
Disgrace,
in the
what a
image.
disgrace.
He smiled and
Lord
said,
Divine Weapon,
"This prince
please
didn't
save us
use his
again."
full strength back
the
then.
ancestral dragons
Then
were
why did
also
he do that?
panicking and
If he
crying
used
for
his
help
full
and
strength
despair.
back then,
It
you
has
might
already
have
been
lost
cut
him.
into pieces by
The
Qin
blood
Feiyong
Kirin said,
and you still
Ahem.
wanted to save you?
Qin Feiyong
The mad
coughed and
scientist
glanced at
face
the
was
blood
full of
Kirin
mockery as
he
he
said
stepped in front
helplessly,
of a stone
"In your
statue
eyes, am
and
I that
waved his
weak?"
hand.
This,
shattering the stone
blood
statue
Kirin
on the
smiled
spot.
awkwardly.
This also
Although
meant
he is
that a
strong,
half-step
I
imperishable
am not afraid
realm
of him.
expert had fallen.
If I used my full
now,
strength,
killing these
I might
petrified
not lose to
dragons
him.
was as easy as
Qin
killing
Feiyang's
chickens
eyes
and
were
sheep.
filled with confidence.
Mad scientist, you're courting death.
The blood
Sovereign
Kirin
dragon
nodded.
roared as her
Fire
divine
Lotus
power
looked
surged
confused.
out and pounced
Then what's
at the
wrong
mad
with little
scientist.
madman?
How come he
Snowflake.
doesn't have any
Qin
side
Feiyang
effects?
shouted.
Clang.
Back in Pluto hell.
Snowflake immediately
said he was
opened a
researching
space
tunnel
blood prison
and descended in
reduce the
front of
side
the mad
effects of
scientist,
self-destruction,
blocking the
I
power
think he
of
has
sovereign
succeeded by
dragon.
now.
Kill her
Qin
directly.
Feiyang smiled.
Qin Feiyang
Does
ordered.
that mean blood
To
prison
avoid
is
any more
invincible?
trouble,
Everyone
best
looked at
to
each
kill
other.
sovereign dragon
Blood
as soon
prison's
as
power
possible.
was scarier than
Okay.
self-destruction.
Snowflake's
Once there were no
artifact
side
spirit
effects,
responded and
he would
charged
be able
at
to
sovereign
kill
dragon.
anyone who stood in his
Mad
way.
scientist
Invincible?
Qin Feiyang.
You
Our
could say
battle
it
is
isn't over
invincible.
yet.
But
However,
against the
at this
Prince of
moment,
Dragons,
a calm
it
voice
doesn't
suddenly
seem to be
sounded.
enough. Qin Feiyang
Qin
smiled,
Feiyang
and the
rumbled.
mad scientists were
Outside,
startled.
The
As they
shockwaves of the
quickly
battle
turned
were
to look
still
at the
destroying
stone statue
everything.
of the Prince
The
of the
madman
Dragons.
stood in the wind
Because this was the
staring
voice
at the
of
Prince
the
of Dragons
and
and
Mystic Moon.
However,
apart from
the Prince
himself,
of the Dragons
he
had
rarely
been
admired
completely
anyone
petrified.
else.
So
It
why
wasn't
was
that
there
he was
still a voice
narcissistic,
coming out?
but he had the
Mad
ability.
scientist, you're really
Because whether
strong.
it was creating
In my
God's
opinion,
skills or
you've
comprehending
even
laws,
surpassed Qin Feiyang.
he was far better
But
than
if you
others.
think you can defeat
But
me
now,
like this, then
the
you're
Prince
wrong.
of Dragons in
Revive
front
for
of
me.
him really
As the
made
Prince
him
of the
admire
Dragons
him.
roared.
Let's
A
continue.
monstrous aura suddenly erupted from the stone
We are all
statue.
waiting to watch a good show.
What?
It's
Suddenly,
actually the aura
a
of a
familiar voice
heaven-defying
sounded.
divine artifact.
The madman and the
Qin
Prince of
Feiyang
Dragons turned
and the
their
mad
heads at the
scientist's
same
expression
time
suddenly
and saw a
changed
familiar
as their
figure
faces
appear
were
out
filled
of
with
thin air not
disbelief.
far away.
Didn't the Prince
That's
of
right.
the Dragons'
It was
sacred
Qin
dragon
Feiyang
sword and the
Feiyang,
blood demon tower
Qin
both
Batian,
suffer injuries?
and the others saw
How
Qin
could it
Feiyang
revive?
wake up?
No,
And a trace of
this
joy
wasn't the
appeared on
aura
their
of the
faces.
sacred dragon
But the
sword.
faces of dragon
the aura
sovereign
of the sacred
and
dragon
the others
sword
were
was the
extremely
same as the
ugly.
heavenly dragon
How did he
soul,
wake up so
filled
quickly?
with the sacred
And
aura.
looking at his appearance, his injuries had healed. The
But
madman
now,
was already
this aura
so
carried
difficult
a
to
vicious
deal with.
aura.
And
Just
now
like
there
the
was
soul
Qin
of the ice
Feiyang.
dragon.
Could it be
They were
that the Prince of
extremely
the
worried in
Dragons
their
had another
hearts.
heaven-defying
Fire dragon
divine
ancestor
artifact
dragon
besides
shouted,
the sacred dragon
Qin
sword?
Feiyang, this is a battle between this madman and his highness. Don't try to take advantage of the situation.
Chapter 29:29.
Qin Feiyang
What's
was
going
stunned.
on?
He
Not
looked
to
up
mention
at the fire
Qin
dragon
Feiyang
and the
ancestral
others.
dragon and said,
Even the dragons
"You don't think
and
that
the
I will
ancestral
join
dragons
forces
were
with the
stunned.
madman, do you?"
Obviously, Humph.
I don't know what's
the
going
fire
on.
dragon ancestral
Clang.
dragon snorted,
Accompanied by a sword
Don't
cry
measure
that
the
shook
heart
the
of a
heavens and
gentleman
earth.
with the
A
yardstick of a
terrifying
villain.
sharp light
Although
surged
I,
out.
Qin Feiyang,
Crack.
am not a good
Immediately,
person. The
I won't do
phosphorus
such
on
a
the
thing.
dragon's prince's
However,
body shattered.
I am looking
revealing
forward
a
to
bloody
real
body
battle with him.
Sky Dragon's power.
After Qin Feiyang
Following
finished speaking,
closely, he
with a
turned to
low
look at the
shout,
Prince of Dragons
waves of
and
divine
said with
power
a smile,
emerged.
Last
And the
time
bloody
you
body
didn't use your full
immediately
strength,
recovered at a speed
which made me
visible
feel
to the
very
naked eye.
regretful.
What a
So I
terrifying
want to ask
recovery
you to quickly
ability.
defeat senior
Qin
brother
Feiyang
Madman,
and the others were
and let's
shocked.
fight again.
Clang.
Defeat
Without
me?
waiting for
Brat,
Qin
you must be
Feiyang and
dreaming.
the others to
The
recover.
madman rolled his
A
eyes at
divine
Qin
light
Feiyang.
suddenly rushed out from
That's
the
not
dragon's
necessarily
prince's
true.
body.
It
Qin
was a
Feiyang
long sword.
smiled faintly.
It was about a
TSK.
meter long. The
As
madman
thin as a
smiled
cicada's
disdainfully
wing,
and said,
as if it was
"Watch how I
condensed
deal
from
with
ice.
him."
The
Emitting
Prince
a
of
world
Dragons
destroying
also
sharp
smiled
light.
slightly.
This is
Looked at Qin Feiyang
and
said,
the others
"All
stared
right,
at the long
I will
sword.
quickly defeat him.
This long sword
and then
was
have
really
a real
not the
life
holy
and death
dragon
battle
sword.
with you."
This
Fuck.
is the ice dragon
So
sword.
arrogant.
The
Blood
dragon's
demon
prince
tower.
spoke. Come out
The
for
ice
me and
dragon
crush
sword
him.
emitted a
The
mighty
madman
divine
was
power.
furious. Blocking
With
the
a clang,
petrification
the
effect
blood
of the
demon
blood
tower
tower suddenly appeared.
Ice dragon
In
sword.
its divine
Everyone
might
was
shrouded the world.
surprised.
That's
Heaven-defying
right.
divine
The ice
artifact.
dragon sword is
The
also
Prince
a
of Dragons
heaven-defying
murmured,
divine artifact.
and with a wave of his hand,
But even my mother
a
and
3
sister
feet long
don't know
sword
about the
appeared.
existence of the ice
Heaven-defying
dragon
divine
sword.
artifact.
The
Holy
only people
dragon
who know
sword.
about it are my
Clang.
father and me.
The 2 heaven-defying
The dragon's
divine
prince smiled
artifacts
slightly.
immediately unsealed
Qin
and
Feiyang
fully
couldn't
recovered.
help but look at
Seeing
Long
this,
Zun.
Qin
Qin
Feiyang
Feiyang
flashed
surprised
and retreated
face.
to the
It
side of
seemed that
Qin
he really
Batian
didn't know.
and Lu Xungyang.
2 heaven-defying
Immediately
divine
after,
artifacts.
the
It
sunset
was really
bow and
unexpected.
other heaven-defying
Madman
divine
looked at
artifacts
the dragon's
appeared,
prince and frowned.
condensing into a divine
You are now the
shield shield
soul
in
of the
front
heavenly
them.
dragon?
The heaven-defying
Because at this
divine
moment,
artifact had
the
fully
dragon's
recovered.
prince's cultivation
It was no
had
joke,
returned to the
and they
small
had to defend
success
with all their
undead
might.
realm. And his expression and tone didn't have the slightest bit of hostility.
Chapter 29-22.
Making people feel
On
as
the
if
other
they were
side,
sitting in a spring
Long
breeze.
Zune and the others kept
Yes,
retreating.
The
They
dragon's
didn't have a
prince nodded.
heaven-defying
Then
divine
this
artifact.
ice dragon sword was
Nor did
also
they have a
refined by your
sovereign
father.
divine weapon to protect
Madman
them.
frowned.
So they
That's
could
what
only
father
retreat
said.
far away.
But I don't know
Clang.
if he was the one
Prince
who refined
Dragons
it.
grabbed the sacred
However,
dragon
this
sword
is no
while
longer
Madman
important.
grabbed the blood demon tower.
You've shown me your full
Kill.
strength. The two
To
of
show
them
you
roared
my
at the same
respect,
time.
I'll show you
and
my full
charged over
strength
with
now.
their two
The
heaven-defying
prince of the
divine
dragon
artifacts.
smiled.
An
What?
even more
Still
terrifying
hiding a trump
fluctuation
card.
immediately
Madman
rolled
was
out
shocked.
in all directions
Fayong
with this place
transmitted
as the
his voice.
center. He doesn't
Ancestral
seem to be
dragon
putting
asked.
on an act.
Lord Long
Be
Zun,
careful.
is there any
Yes.
hope for Prince?
Madman nodded.
I don't know.
Clang.
Long
With
Zun
the sword
shook his
hum.
head. Another
Ancestral
battle sword
dragon
appeared
fire
before
dragon
the dragon
said,
prince.
Lord,
This
we
was
can't
the shattered
just sit and
sacred
wait for
dragon
death.
sword.
We have
The
to
entire
think of a
sword
way.
was broken into
Do you have
5
a
or
way?
6 pieces,
Long
dim
Zun
and
asked.
lifeless.
Ancestral
The holy
dragon
dragon
fire
sword
dragon
and the
eyes
ice
flashed
dragon
as he
sword
whispered,
are not
Actually,
ordinary
I do have a
heaven-defying
plan.
divine artifacts.
Speak.
The
Long
Prince of
Zun was
Dragons
stunned
spoke.
and hurriedly said,
What do you mean?
The other
Qin
ancestral
Fei Yang and
dragons
the others
also
frowned.
stared at
It
ancestral
was not an
dragon
ordinary
fire
divine
dragon.
artifact.
What do
Why
Qin
couldn't he
Batian
understand?
and Qin Fei Yang care about the most?
It's undoubtedly
You will
the
understand
creatures of
very
the ancient
soon.
world.
The Prince
We
of
might as
Dragons
well send
waved his
people
hand,
to the 4 major
and the
regions
fragments of the
and
holy
use the
dragon sword
creatures of the
quickly
4 major
reassembled.
regions to
Although
threaten
the
them.
broken parts were not
Ancestral
repaired,
dragon fire
they
dragon
could be considered
sneered.
complete.
Good idea.
Then,
the
ancestral
Prince of
dragons
Dragons
raised
eyes
his
lit up.
hands,
Could
holding
my
the
ask,
holy dragon
since
sword in
Qin
one
Fei Yang
hand
has
and
transferred
the
the
ice
creatures
dragon
of the
sword in
divine
the other.
land,
At
you
this
will
moment,
definitely think of
everyone
protecting
present
the
stared
creatures of the 4
fixedly at the
major
2
regions.
heaven,
Look
defying
for
divine
yourselves.
artifacts.
Have you seen
The
the
Prince of
mermaid
Dragons
emperor,
grabbed the
Blackwing
2 heaven
emperor,
defying
White-winged
divine
emperor, and
artifacts
Sword
and
emperor?
slowly approached
If
each
I'm
other.
not wrong, what is he
They
trying
must
to
be guarding
do?
the entrance
The
of the
madman
4 major
frowned.
regions.
Finally, we'll talk
the 2
about it
heaven
later.
defying divine
The 4 major
artifacts
regions
collided
are
with
still
each
guarded
other
by those 4 old things.
At this time,
Sending people
the Prince
to the
of
4 major
Dragons
regions
also let out a low
is digging
shout.
our own graves.
The 2
and courting
heaven-defying
death.
divine
Long
artifacts
Zun
immediately
shouted,
shone brightly
facing Long Zun
and merged
scolding.
into one.
In
Ancestral
other
dragon
words,
blood didn't
the
dare
holy
to say
dragon
anything.
sword and the ice
Ancestral
dragon
dragon
sword had
fire
merged
dragon
into
said
one,
unwillingly,
turning from 2
then we
divine
can also send
artifacts
people
into
to
one.
take a look.
This,
What if
everyone
Qin Fei
was
Yang didn't think
dumbfounded.
of it?
Including
All
the
right, then you
dragon
go.
sovereign,
Long
and the
transmitted
various
his
ancestral
voice.
dragons.
Don't Lord. Fusion of
Look at
heaven
this.
defying
There are
divine
so many
artifacts.
ready-made cannon
There was
fodder.
actually such a
Why
thing
do
in
you
the
want me to
world.
go?
After the
Fire
fusion,
dragon
the
ancestral
divine
Gragon
artifact
felt
turned
wronged.
into a broadsword.
Long Zun's heart
It was
skipped
about
a beat.
one.
He
5
couldn't
meters
help
long.
but cast a
It
glance
was as wide
at the
as human
human
fingers
supreme masters
on
beside
both
him.
sides of the sword
Sir,
body.
just let a
There
few
was a
half-step
sacred sky
undying
dragon
humans
pattern
go.
on one side,
Even if they die,
and a
it
sinister
won't be
ice
much of a
dragon
loss to
pattern
us.
on the other.
And if it succeeds,
This is the true
that would be an
appearance of the
excellent
ice dragon
bargaining
sword
chip.
and the holy
Fire dragon
sword.
ancestral
They are
dragon
called the ice
transmitted
dragon
his
holy
voice.
sword.
Long
The
Zun
Prince of
pondered for a
Dragons
moment,
raised his hand,
and then he turned
and
to
grabbed
look at
the
Wang
hilt
Chang
of the
and
ice
said,
dragon holy
Wang
sword.
Chang.
He looked
Send
at the
some
madman
people to
and
the
smiled.
northern, western,
Ice
southern,
dragon
and
holy
eastern
sword.
territories.
The madman's heart trembled.
Wang Chang was
with the
slightly
fusion of
stunned
2
and asked in
heaven-defying
puzzlement.
divine artifacts.
Go to the 4 great
Wouldn't that
regions
mean
for
that
what?
its power had already
Just do as I
surpassed
say.
the heaven-defying
Long Zun
divine
said.
artifacts? Awaken, ice
Wang
dragon
Chang
holy
thought
sword.
about it carefully.
The Prince of
and
Dragons
instantly
whispered.
came to an
The way
understanding.
he looked at the ice
and he
dragon
sent a
holy
voice
sword was
transmission.
extremely
Then
gentle.
why don't you allow this
as if
old
he was
man
looking
to
at his
personally
lover.
lead them over?
Clang, you're going
Immediately,
personally. The ice
Long Zun
dragon holy
frowned.
sword suddenly
That's right.
trembled as a
If we
world
let them
destroying
go,
might roared
they
out.
might not be able to
What?
successfully
The moment
enter
the
the
ice
4 great
dragon holy
regions.
sword emitted its
In any
aura.
case,
Everyone
this old
present
man is
couldn't
also
help
at the
but
great
change their
success
expressions,
imperishable stage.
especially Yi
The
Zhong and
success
the
rate
others.
will be higher.
This was because
Wang
the aura
Chang
of
said,
the ice dragon holy
this,
sword
Long Zun
had already
hesitated.
far surpassed
Fire
that of a
dragon
heaven-defying
ancestral
divine
dragon
glanced at
artifact.
Wang Chang.
Not only
and
that,
sent a voice
it also had the
transmission.
aura of a dominator
Sir,
divine
if he wants
weapon.
to go, then let him
Could
go.
it be?
Long Zun
Everyone
glanced
couldn't
at fire
help but have
dragon
a terrifying
ancestral
thought
dragon,
in their minds.
then turned to Wang
Could it
Chang
be
and
that the
said,
fused ice
"All right,
dragon
then be
holy sword
careful.
was a sovereign
Yes.
divine weapon?
Wang Chang
Swish.
replied respectfully.
Suddenly,
Glancing
Prince
at
of
the
Dragons
human
took a
experts
step
around him
forward.
and asked. The madman
Who is
was
willing to
startled
follow this
and
old man to
instinctively
the 4 great
retreated.
regions.
However, the
But
Prince
no
of
one said a
Dragons
word.
didn't attack him.
As expected,
the Prince of
they are
Dragons
all
landed in
cowards who
front
are
of
afraid
Long
of
Zun.
death.
He
The
waved
10
the ice
ancestral
dragon
dragons
holy
sneered
sword in
in
his
their
hand
hearts.
and attacked
I'll go.
Snowflake.
An old
Snowman
woman
beside
beside
Wang
Wang
Chang said. She was at the lesser success imperishable stage. I'll go too. And me. Soon. Another 10 lesser success imperishable stage humans spoke one after another, with a trace of determination on their faces. Including Wang Chang and the old woman, there were a total of 12 people. 1 greater success imperishable stage, and 11 lesser success imperishable stage. If this force really successfully entered the 4 great regions, it would be a scene of misery and suffering. Be careful. Long Zun looked at them and reminded. Yes. Wang Chang nodded, and immediately
turned to leave. Long Zun said.
She immediately
Open
opened
the
the
space-time
space-time
tunnel.
and
Wang
fled
Chang
to
was
Qin
stunned
Fei
and asked
outside.
suspiciously,
At least you're fast.
Isn't it impossible
The Prince
to
of
open
Dragons
the altar
muttered.
in the inner sea?
Then the ice
In the
dragon
past,
holy sword
it was
slashed
because
through
of
the
the
air.
sovereign
The
divine
petrification
weapon
of Long
that we
Zun
couldn't
was
open the
forcefully
altar.
cut off.
But now
The
that the
recovery
sovereign
ability
divine
of
weapon
Long
is
Zun
seriously
was even more
injured,
terrifying.
the power that
Back
enveloped
then in
the
the
inner
Sky
sea has
Dragon's sea,
disappeared.
The
Now
ancestral
in the inner
dragon's
sea,
divine dragon
we
body
can open
was
the
cut off
altar
by
and
Qin
send
Fei's.
messages.
But with
If
a
there
wave
is
of
any
his
news,
hand,
immediately
it was
inform
restored
me.
to its original
Long
state.
Zun said.
So, Yes,
when the
12
petrification was
people
forcefully
responded
cut
respectfully,
her petrified divine body
was instantly
and Qin
restored.
Feiyang and the others,
Prince of Dragons
who were far
said,
away,
"Mother,
didn't see this
take
scene.
the clansmen
Clang,
and leave the inner
boom,
sea immediately."
The battle between
"What
the Prince
about
of
you?"
Dragons and
Long Zun
Lunatic was
hurriedly
still
asked.
ongoing. This
The
battle
two haven't
concerns the
defined
fate of us
divine
dragons
weapons
had different
I won't
degrees
back
of
down,
damage,
and I
under the
can't
constant
lose.
collision.
The Prince of
North
Dragons
region,
smiled.
Holy Dragon
But
City,
Long
the
Zun was
originally
anxious.
majestic
At
Holy
the same
Dragon
time,
City,
she blamed
had long
herself.
been turned into
She was the
ruins.
leader of the dragons,
Swoosh.
the
12
ruler of the
figures
ancient
descended
world.
above the ruins.
She was usually
It was Wang
awe-inspiring,
Chong and the others.
but at the critical
The
moment,
old woman
she was
said,
useless.
"Then let's
This
split up
child
here.
had to carry such
Everyone
a heavy
be
burden."
careful."
She was
Yes.
ashamed. The others
The Prince
nodded.
of Dragons smiled
Hold on.
comfortingly.
However,
with the Ice
just
Dragon
as everyone
Holy
was
Sword,
about
I
to
won't
open the
lose.
door of potential,
Then be careful
and head to the
I'll
four
come
great
back
regions.
to help you after I've
Wang
settled
Chong
my
suddenly
clansmen.
spoke.
Long Zun said,
The old woman,
the Prince
and
of
the others
Dragons
looked
nodded.
at Wang Chong
Long Zun
suspiciously.
immediately turned around and flew toward the other ancestral dragons. "Stop her!" the beast sovereign shouted. The sunset divine bow immediately awakened. An arrow flashing with divine light pierced through the sky and shot toward Long Zun. "As long as I'm standing here, I won't allow anyone to hurt my mother or my clansmen." The Prince of Dragons stood in the void like a god. His long hair and clothes fluttered. Clang! The ice dragon holy sword slashed through the sky, and the arrow shot by the sunset divine bow shattered on the spot. "So strong!" The sunset divine bow was shocked. "This is my child." Long Zun looked at the back of the Prince of Dragons. Her eyes were dazed. She had never thought that this child would be so strong. "Child, mother is proud of you." Murmuring, Long Zun turned around and flew above Ancestral Dragon and the others. The power of the Sky Dragon rolled out and covered everyone. At this moment, the petrification on Ancestral Dragon and the others also started to disappear. But a large portion of them were still petrified. These people were the half-step undying sovereigns that had been petrified, and the sovereigns that had just reached the undying realm, because they had been completely petrified. How could this be? Seeing this scene, Long Zun was dazed. "You still don't know. They have been completely petrified. Without my help, no one can help them get rid of the petrification." The mad scientist smiled coldly. "Damn it. Why is there such a perverted battle soul?" Long Zun was furious. The Prince of Dragons glanced at the petrified people, and then at his furious mother. Finally, he looked back at the mad scientist and said, "Is it really like this? You can try if you don't believe me," the mad scientist said proudly. The Prince of Dragons looked at the ice dragon's sacred sword in his hand and smiled. "Let him see your power of law." Clang! The ice dragon's sacred sword trembled, as if responding to the Prince of Dragons. Then, a vast life energy rolled out and rushed towards Long Zun and the others. Then, those petrified people started to recover. How is this possible? The mad scientist was dumbfounded when he saw this scene. To be able to forcefully remove the petrification, what kind of law was this? The Prince of Dragons said, "One of the strongest laws in the world, the law of life." Law of life? The mad scientist paused. Qin Feiyang also had a trace of suspicion on his face. However, the faces of Qin Batian, Yi Zhong and the rest changed drastically. The law of life has endless vitality and can heal everything in the world. Even the highest profound meaning can bring the dead back to life. The Prince of Dragons laughed. So powerful. The mad scientist was dumbfounded. Qin Feiyang looked at Yi Zhong, Qin Batian, and the others and asked, "Master Ancestor, is that so?" Yi Zhong and the others nodded. "Law of life, one of the strongest laws," Qin Feiyang muttered. The power of law of this ice dragon sacred sword was too terrifying. Wait a minute. The last two words of the six-word divine art were life and death. Could it be, as he guessed, that these two words represented the law of life and death? We're free. Let's go. In the blink of an eye, those who were completely petrified finally recovered. They looked at the mad scientist in horror and followed Long Zun into the sky. "Feiyang, we can't let Long Zun escape. Otherwise, if she wants to enter the four major regions, the Sword Emperor and the others won't be able to stop her," Qin Batian shouted. Because Long Zun controlled the law of space, she didn't need to go through the entrances of the four major regions. Hearing this,
Qin Feiyang looked at the sunset divine bow and the other heaven-defying artifacts and shouted, "Seal the inner sea for me." Clang! The various heaven-defying artifacts immediately rushed into the sky and stood at the peak of the sky. Divine power rolled in all directions, and in an instant, a huge barrier enveloped the entire inner sea. Just a mere heaven-defying artifact. You want to stop my people? The Prince of Dragons slashed at the sky. Sword Chi roared in all directions, and the barrier shattered on the spot. What? Qin Feiyang was stunned. One must know. The sunset divine bow and the other heaven-defying artifacts had been cultivating in the land of origin for many years, and had long surpassed the limits of heaven-defying artifacts. But now in the face of the Ice Dragon's sacred sword, it was so weak. The Ice Dragon's sacred sword was a sovereign divine weapon. Chapter 2930. Another sovereign divine weapon. How could they continue fighting? Just like the dragon god sword. In order to destroy it, how much did Qin Feiyang pay? And how much blood did he absorb? And now, the Ice Dragon's sacred sword appeared again. Even if Qin Feiyang attacked, there was not enough blood for him to use the kill formula. Moreover, he could not open the slaughter domain now, because the slaughter domain could only be opened once a day. Just you wait. I will personally come to the 4 major regions and let you know the consequences of going against me, the dragons. Long Zun watched the barrier shatter and smiled coldly at Qin Feiyang and the others. Then, she opened a space-time crack. When Qin Feiyang and the others heard this, their hearts sank. Especially Madman, Fire Lotus, and Hui in the castle. Their faces turned pale. Because in the North region, there were their relatives. If Long Zun really came to the North region, the consequences would be unbelievable. Yi Zhong suddenly said, "Don't be so nervous. Long Zun can't leave the divine land." Can't leave? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Long Zun could not leave the divine land. This was indeed a fact, and he had known it for a long time. But it was different now. Divine Dragon Island had collapsed, and the sovereign divine weapon had been destroyed. Then this restriction should be gone. Yes, you may think that it is the sovereign divine weapon and the dragon god that are restricting her, but that is not the case. The real restriction is the guardians of the 4 major regions. As long as these 4 guardians are here, she can forget about stepping into the 4 major regions. Yi Zhong said. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood. Qin Batian also said, I have seen these 4 guardians before. Why didn't I know about this? Then how long have you been with them? I'm afraid you only met them briefly at most. But I am different. I have followed Long Zun for many years. I have heard about this from her. Yi Zhong said. Qin Batian said, if that's the case, then it's not a big problem. Long Zun glanced at Yi Zhong and sneered. Yi Zhong, do you think you're very smart? No, I've never considered myself very smart. Because if I was really smart, I wouldn't have been used by you for so many years. Yi Zhong sighed. Haha. Long Zun laughed and said, following Qin Feiyang, you've learned to know your own limits. Yes, I'm actually the biggest culprit behind the fall of the human race. Because it was this old man who single-handedly created the Dragon God Palace. It was also this old man who set them on a path of no return. Yi Zhong shook his head in self-mockery. The biggest mistake he had ever made in his life was creating the Dragon God Temple. If he hadn't created the Dragon God Palace, people like Li Chong wouldn't have fallen into this situation. Yes, you are a sinner. You should forgive yourself. As for the 4 great regions, this sovereign is indeed unable to leave the divine continent, but this sovereign's clone can go. The 10 great ancestral dragons can go. The strongest of my dragons can also go. With just this power, it's enough to plunge the 4 great regions into misery and suffering. Just wait for despair. Long Zun laughed, his words filled with ruthlessness and madness. Yi Zhong clenched his fists and said angrily, what's wrong with these creatures? Why do you have to drag them into this? This is the price of angering my dragons. Long Zun said, you're a lunatic. Yi Zhong roared. Yes, this sovereign is a lunatic, but this is because of you. After letting you linger on for so many years, It's time for the human race to go extinct. Long Zun smiled sinisterly and turned to walk towards the space-time crack. Mother. But at this time, the Prince of the Dragons spoke. What's wrong? Long Zun was slightly taken aback. He stopped and turned his head to look at the Prince of the Dragons suspiciously. The Prince of the Dragons was silent for a while and sighed. Don't hurt those innocent creatures, okay? Long Zun shook his head and said, Silly child, can't you see? They want to annihilate all of our dragons. If we are lenient, they won't be lenient. I know, but I really don't agree with this kind of heinous act. The Prince of the Dragons said. Bastard, isn't it heinous for them to slaughter our dragons? Long Zun said angrily. Mother. The Prince of the Dragons shouted. Shut up. I can agree to your other requests but not this one. Long Zun said. Then go. The guardians of the 4 great regions are not weak. Even if you let your clansmen go, they may not succeed. The Prince of the Dragons said. Then let's burn together with them. No matter how strong those 4 old things are, can they stop our clansmen from self-destructing? Long Zun roared. Self-destructing? The Prince of the Dragons' eyes trembled. She actually wanted her clansmen to self-destruct and perish with the 4 great regions? Qin Feiyang and the others also trembled. This woman was completely crazy. You old witch. You actually want all the creatures of the ancient world to die with you dragons. I will never let you succeed, even if I have to pay with my life. The madman suddenly roared and activated the heaven-defying technique, the blood demon domain, and crazily attacked Long Zun. Don't talk about pouncing on me like a mad dog. Even if you really self-destruct, you can't stop me. Long Zun smiled contemptuously and stepped into the time crack with tens of thousands of experts. No, the madman roared. Qin Feiyang's expression suddenly changed. He looked at Yi Zhong, Qin Batian, and Lu Xingyang and roared. Master Ancestor, immediately take everyone and all the heaven-defying artifacts to the 4 great regions. What about you? Yi Zhong hurriedly said. Qin Feiyang said. Senior brother Madman and I are enough here. But the Ice Dragon's sacred sword is a sovereign weapon, Yi Zhong said. I know, but the 4 great regions are more important, because all the creatures of the ancient world are now in the 4 great regions. Qin Feiyang said. This. What else did Qin Batian want to say? Go! Qin Feiyang roared. Qin Baishan's body trembled. He actually felt a great sense of oppression from Qin Feiyang. Okay, be careful. Qin Batian nodded his head as he opened up a space-time tear. A group of people and various heaven-defying divine weapons instantly rushed in. Watching everyone leave and watching the time crack gradually close, Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and looked at the Prince of Dragons. At this moment, in the entire sky above the inner sea, only Qin Feiyang, Madman, and the Prince of Dragons were left. Qin Feiyang looked at the Prince of Dragons and said, This is our fate. Between me and senior brother Madman and you, one of us must die here. That's right. I really want to be friends with you, but unfortunately, I don't have the chance. The Prince of Dragons smiled. Don't try to get close to me. If this old man really dies in the hands of you dragons, I swear that I will destroy you all for the rest of my life. Madman roared. As long as you kill me, I believe that with your strength you can do it. The Prince of Dragons nodded. Then come. Madman took a step forward and activated all the divine arts. A terrifying aura shattered heaven and earth. Qin Feiyang also took a step forward and landed beside Madman. All kinds of divine arts appeared out of thin air, exuding a world-destroying divine might. The power of the sovereign weapon was obvious to all. Even if Madman and Qin Feiyang worked together, they wouldn't be able to defeat it. But now they had no other choice. They could only take out their old lives and fight to the death with the Prince of Dragons. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.